November 8th, 2021, starting at 6:30, except it's not 6:30, it's almost 7. I apologize that we are running late. If you join me, please, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kindly accept this as notice that the board met in executive session immediately prior to the public meeting today. We discussed matters of undocketed legal issues and personnel matters. Moving on to public participation.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue, residents of 40 years there. Can hardly believe it. Speaking for the Green Team. No one would have predicted the convergence of so many factors that has affected Radnor in the last 20 months. The election of 2020 and shortly thereafter, the insurrection in the Capitol and the to our democracy. Reassessments of all properties in Delaware County, Radnor Township, and the chaos that has caused with people who have been reassessed they're now being stretched. COVID-19 closed down businesses, schools, activities. Fear and the increased cost to protect the residents and the loss of business income. The environment. This summer was the hottest summer on record. We had weird rainfall events, storms, and it had a consequential effect on trees. Health. The heat, the smoke from Oregon, which definitely was a problem. The timing of the Radnor Township School District infrastructure project. The recent election, and now the passage of the federal infrastructure bill, which has the possibility of helping Radnor. All this resulted in Radnor directly responding to the current emergencies and a delayed response to climate change. Now is the time to pursue creating the sustainability director / grant writer. The township has important energy-related needs projects in the queue, roofing on 3 buildings, and HVAC in this building. These are long-term investments in configurations that will have a long service life, we hope, optimize energy performance, provide more resilient facilities, make the buildings solar ready, and move towards the township's 2035 goal for the Ready for 100. Having a combined grant writer sustainability position assures that the person writing the grant will have enough technical knowledge on energy and sustainability to properly write grant requests. Otherwise, you may need to hire 2 persons, energy and grant writer, in order to put these requests together and in managing the ongoing clean energy initiative. By securing energy-related grants, the township can invest in projects that will more than pay for themselves in energy savings. This makes great financial sense and environmental sense and will engage the community by showing leadership in energy performance. Now, many of your primary community stakeholders want the township to go down this path, and prioritizing energy projects in township facilities will allow Radnor to keep up with those stakeholders who participated in the strategic planning process by Practical Energy Solutions. Most of them are already investing in significant energy initiatives, including Villanova University, the Radnor School District, Brandywine Realty Trust, Cabrini Eastern University, Mainline Health, and numerous local houses of worship and residence. The events of the last 2 years are a wake-up call that we need to start now in addressing renewal. Sean, listen, don't talk. You weren't, you were talking. in addressing renewable energy initiatives, and we will never reach our goals by engaging in business as usual. Fighting the effects of air pollution and greenhouse gases will require extraordinary commitment and follow-through, and will require us to start down that path now with progress needed every year. The township would not be doing this work alone. There are other entities working hard, outside entities such as the Delco Sustainability Director, DVRPC, and nonprofits engaging in mitigating climate change, so we should consider ways and opportunities to collaborate with other county governments, townships, boroughs, and activists volunteering. And then there is the Green Team, who would be in a liaison with the RF100 groups in Montgomery County, Chester County, Delaware County, to support the Sustainability Director by attending meetings and bringing information back to that person, educating the Radnor residents, mentoring the Earth Action Leadership Conference at the Radnor High School, which now has 150 members, and serving as role models by embracing and speaking one-to-one on what they're doing to mitigate climate change and to adapt. So I'm not going to implore, I'm going to try not to be angry, but the time is now, guys. We cannot wait any longer. Thank you.
Good evening, Ken Kearns, 221 Walnut Avenue. Here tonight on behalf of the Wayne Business Association to say thank you to the Board of Commissioners and to the Township Administration for all the help you guys gave us with regards to the Wayne Picnic Grove in town. And want you to realize what a difference you made for not only the businesses in Wayne during a very difficult period, in particular the merchants on North Wayne Avenue, but the residents of our township who really reacted favorably and had incredible connection to what we were all collectively able to do there. We got some incredible recognition regionally and nationally from everything from the Radnor Patch to the Wall Street Journal on behalf of all of our collective efforts. So thank you very much for all you guys did for the last year and a half to help us out. Thank you.
Good evening. Lynn Ellis, Lewis Lane. There have been a number of public comments at these meetings regarding the lack of historical value of Garrett Avenue. So I'd like to give you some information regarding the area from Phyllis Mayer's History of Garrett Hill and its 100th anniversary in 1970. When the railroads were expanded from Philadelphia in the 1850s, it brought a lot of population and business to the area, which came to a standstill after the Civil War. But then in 1866, a medical doctor named Lewis T. Garrett purchased over 19 acres, and soon the area became known as Garrettville, replacing the name Methodist Hill. The property in 1871, when Dr. Garrett sold his house on the Garrettville property, his land ran from Lowry's Lane to an unnamed road, which soon became known as Garrett Avenue. A subdivision was prepared, dividing the remaining land into 79 lots, which remain the makeup of Garrett Avenue today. By 1877, there were 31 houses located close to the street, giving space in the rear for gardens, chickens, the outhouse, and sometimes a second house. It's incorrect to say that Garrett Avenue has no history or historical value, when it is a rich and diverse blue-collar neighborhood with a proud history that all the neighbors are very proud of. Thank you.
Seeing no additional comment, we are going to move to the consent agenda. Are there any items of the
If I
consent?
may. Do you mind? Yeah, sure. If I may, President Larkin, barring any, I just want to make this statement. Barring any delay in the certification of our most recent election, this may be, maybe not, but may be, my last Board of Commissioners meeting as the Commissioner for the 3rd Ward. So I'd like to say just a few words now, rather than at the end when really nobody's listening. So first, serving as a representative for the 3rd Ward has been and still is a great honor. And clearly, it's the best ward. Please, don't fight me on this. We are open, welcoming, we host. I know you may disagree, Kenny, but I think the best event in the township. Maybe not just in Radnor Township, but in any townships around. So, and I'd also like to thank the Radnor Township staff. Everyone from Florence and Mary at the reception, to everyone behind the plexiglass on the first floor, and to the rare air of the second floor. It has been a pleasure to work with you. John Rice, you always give wise counsel. Manager White, Bill. I can only say what a constituent said to me about you. You know, Kathy, since I've been watching the meetings, that guy is really impressive. And I said, what guy? And I'm kidding. I knew he meant you. Or the constituent was talking about you, and I readily concurred. And even this past Thursday, when we met out in the 3rd Ward, and about some of the street paving and curb issues, and we were discussing it, and I said, you know what this makes me think of? And you said, yes, I do, Commissioner. Actually, you called me Kathy. Yes, I do, Kathy. And I said, oh, really, what? And you said, you're thinking about how you're unhappy with the inspection system. And I said, God, he's impressive. That's exactly what I was thinking about. And so that just tells me that you listen, Bill. And so thank you. And there's the ever-gracious Peggy Hagan. Let's face it, our township's MVP. Thank you for making every time I come to you into your office, which, by the way, is the largest office in the township, and it deserves to be. And I know it's the reception area, but still, it's yours. Nonetheless, you make every interaction an absolute pleasure. Your kindness and patience with me, and your great sense of humor. It's so natural, Peggy. I have to think you're like that with everybody, but I think it's just me. Amy and Mr. Tate, the tax man, thank you as well for your patience and willingness to help me get my arms around the budget. You know, sometimes when I text my friends, my half of my heritage comes out, the Italian half. And I often text mille grazie, which is 1,000 thanks. So for Amy and Bob, I'd like to say, I think we should just change it now to, as you know, Roberto, mille grazie, 1,000 mills. We thank you. Superintendent Flanagan, thank you and to your department for the professionalism, and especially for your willingness to listen and to act to help our township. Directors, oh, Molly, there you are. Molly, you're always a good time, always fun. I love talking to you, and you do a great job in getting the word out for us. Directors Foster and Kachansky, thank you for being so very responsive to the 3rd Ward. You have never failed to help in whatever way I've asked. You've always done it. Tammy, thank you. You know, we've worked before on Porch Fest, and I've always taken into account and said that woman really knows what she's talking about, but for one thing, and that's that Pittsburgh paraphernalia you got going on in that office. I don't know what it's about, I mean, they're out of town, but whatever. Engineer Norsini, thank you. You know, we've kept each other very, very busy, all for the sake of bringing to the township, and I have to say especially to my constituents of the 3rd Ward, an ever-increasingly better quality of life. So it's been a pleasure. To my colleagues up on the dais, thank you so very much for this experience. Excuse me. For entrusting me for the representation of the 3rd Ward. It has been and will continue to be an honor of a lifetime. Jake, who would have guessed we'd ever get along? Me, a moderate liberal. You know, out there. Out there, but who would have thought? Maura, my buddy, thank you so much. Jack, I have to say thank you so very much for being a terrific president. I really appreciate it. Lisa, as I always say, you're our North Star. I was told before I got here, watch you, you'll learn how to govern. That's what I've done. Thank you. Sean, I've learned what it is to have great passion in representing a ward. Ricky Booker, even though we've had our differences, it's been a good time. It's been fun. To everyone, the residents, the neighbors, and most of all to the 3rd Ward, thank you for permitting me to serve you. Every question, problem, and issue has been an honor, an opportunity to be of service. And what a great joy it has been. I've loved every minute of it. Even being attacked, you know, has made me grow a thicker skin, as well as given me the opportunity for some terrific witty repartee in the bathroom mirror. and to everyone, the residents, the neighbors, the township staff, and the police department. I hope, and in fact, I am confident, that we can all work together to improve life in Radnor, which on a grander scale, in essence, means it helps us strive toward and achieve that more perfect union to which we all aspire. So thank you. Now, what's the first item there, President Larkin?
Kathy, thank you. This is a bit of a letdown, but moving to consent agenda. Are there any items any of the commissioners would like to pull?
Item E. And Jack, I don't want to pull an item, but I do want to ask if there is a monthly police report, which we usually see on the agenda.
Okay, let's start with E, on the principle of FIFO. Item 2E, Resolution 2021 BPT-01, authorizing the settlement of business tax matter. I will remind the board and staff that we are prohibited by state law from identifying or offering any identifying information about individual business privilege taxpayers. That being said, Commissioner Booker, do you have any specific questions?
No, I don't. Can we say the amount that we're settling for?
I would suggest that we do not, since that would telegraph within a reasonable degree of certainty the taxpayer.
Well, this is a large settlement, and my view would be to not settle this and to proceed to realize the entire amount.
I have a question. This probably is going to pertain more to John Rice, and I apologize I didn't miss the executive session. We're basically putting something on the consent agenda. So for the people in the audience and the people at home, they have no idea what it is. We can't say anything about it. Either we do this upstairs, but to do this in front of people and saying, yeah, we're going to do something, but we're not going to tell you what that is, it's not transparent. It should not be, it certainly should not be on a consent agenda. If we can't use the exact amount, if it's, you know, we can ballpark at 100 to 110,000 or 130,000 or something along those lines. But I'll tell you that if I was at home and I knew that this board was settling with a business and that was it, I would be uncomfortable.
Well, let me just put
So
some
maybe,
information.
so if you want to add to it, I would appreciate it, but the fact that this is on the agenda and nothing is going to be said about it, it really, for me, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Right. Just to explain what this is, the township has a business privilege and mercantile tax under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which is a state act. Identifying information can't be released by any elected officials or staff. You can actually be prosecuted if you do that. So that's why there's no identifying information. With that, however, I think the amount can be disclosed. You know, it's a number that's, you know, will come into the township. The amount, and this is a settlement of a tax that involves penalties and interest. So the amount that the township would receive under the settlement is $110,000. And other than that, you know, this is the way these have been done for the last probably 10 years, Sean.
That's fine. It just seems it's a large amount of money
Yes.
to go on consent, and something like that, in my opinion, and I don't know the legal, I'll leave that up to you, should be discussed at an executive session and then made notice here. But we should not be putting, you know, half or a quarter of the information out for the people at home. It just,
Well,
like I
let me
said.
just, I mean, you have separate legal counsel for your business brokerage tax. You have someone that does audits of businesses, and this was discussed in executive session. This was part of this is basically settlement of litigation, this case.
That's fine,
Yeah.
but it should stay strictly in executive session, so, it's just
Well,
my opinion.
You're approved, it's being approved, it's got to be approved publicly, in my opinion. The township started doing that, I'll say maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago. We don't put any identifying information out, but we do put, basically what's being settled and what revenue is coming into the township, and it's $110,000.
But it just, if this was pulled, if this was put not on consent, but under the committee reports, there could be public comment with this, but the public can't comment. Again, it's just partial, it's partial information, so you should either release all of it or none of it. But just a number and a settlement, like I said, it just raises a lot of, not that anything is wrong here, but it does raise red flags of the process to this. So, my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes. Let's finish up with the items that are on the consent agenda, and then, Jake, I'm going to ask you to ask your question, just because that's not on the consent agenda. I'm moving for items 2A through D. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Jake, the floor is yours.
All right. Appreciate it, President Larkin. Chief Flanagan, I guess my question's for you, and it's not, it actually doesn't deal with the monthly report, but there was an incident that happened near Abrams Lane and Parks Run on November 4th into November 5th. And when I went online to inform neighbors about the incident, I wasn't able to find anything either on the Radnor Township website or the Radnor Police website, either on November 5th, November 6th, or November 7th. I believe something may have been posted on November 8th, and I'm just trying to figure out why that's not put out there for the residents.
So are you referring to the auto theft?
I am.
We had posted a release. I'll have to double check just, what had happened. Our goal is to inform. We definitely waited. We believe another actor was involved. If you saw, there were several crime alerts that came out a day later. So there was a continuous amount of cleanup in regards to the incident. We didn't know the total scope. It seems that either a single individual or multiple individuals had entered vehicles, and obviously the one that we had posted obviously stole a vehicle and was taken into custody without injury to police or to subject. However, the other cases, and I'll just have to review the timing, and I'll get you an email or a phone call, brief you and the manager on it.
Yeah, so, I mean, my concern is that we're making social media posts on November 5th when, a small percentage of the residents are likely on Twitter or Facebook. My thoughts are residents should know where to go to find information on these types of issues, and they should really be directed, in the first instance, they should be directed to the township website. Even on the police department, it's buried in there under the police blogger. So my suggestion is there should be a link on the front page of the Radnor website so residents can go to find updated criminal activities. I mean, right now, if you go to the Radnor website, like the first pop-up story is about a Tasty Cake recall. I mean, we get that on the regional news, and we get that when we go into the grocery store. Residents really need to know what's happening in their backyard, and this was a big incident, big enough for the police department to put it on Twitter. They should have access to it and know where to go to find that information. Second issue is how are the neighbors in that area informed Because many of the residents in that area didn't even know what had happened.
In our current system, people sign up for crime alerts. As you are aware, we have a new system that is going to be launched. So they're more advanced, but there's a crime alert section that you can sign up for, and that has always been our standard of notifying people, is the people who sign up for the crime alerts specifically. If there's something bigger beyond, then we post on the police website and the front page of the township website. But we use the crime alerts. That's what we've always done for many, many years, at least since we had that particular website. I don't know how long.
And so in this instance, there was a neighbor who, I believe, it's my understanding, had a conversation with the police and was told that detectives would be going door to door to inform neighbors, maybe as part of the investigation because there was more than one incident. But there were several neighbors along that street that were not, they had no contact and were not aware of the situation.
Obviously, I can't speak to that direct conversation because I wasn't there, but they're probably referring to a canvas where people will knock and look for ring cameras or other type of evidence, or to check with other people. One of the goals of the release was to ask people to check their vehicles. That release was extremely successful the following day with multiple reports from that, updating us on some vehicle entries of thefts of individual items.
And you said release, a press release?
We did not do a press release, no. The crime alert and the social media alert.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, in this situation, I don't think we informed the neighbors well enough, and would like to see something on the front page of the Radnor website, so neighbors know exactly where to go to see this information.
So if I could, just let's clarify a couple of things, because we volley this issue back and forth from time to time because everyone's expectation on the amount of information that they demand varies. So in one circumstance, one neighbor, we could satisfy their needs by posting every single detail of the event, but someone else might be just as critical for putting that information out because they're not interested. If the situation's buttoned up by the police department, the bad guy is apprehended, and it's a closed case, then a post incident announcement seems fair. If there are situations where someone is at large, or if there is any kind of danger to the community, that's when the larger immediate postings start happening. We went through this a few years ago, and we had an incident over at the Wawa. Information was released that was confidential in terms of the investigation and the actions of the police officers. That subsequently was then publicized, which put the police officers in a dangerous position. So this probably isn't the best forum on the spot without prior notice, but a larger discussion about the level of communication and posting is going to be necessary. The police department does a good job at posting the activity that's going on. But again, it's a broad spectrum from what people want. And every single situation, there is going to be somebody who thinks it was either too much or not enough. So we have to find whatever that spot is in the middle that we're satisfied with. In this particular case, if it's the incident that I think we're talking about, again, we're kind of doing this on the fly without prior notice. It was a situation where the bad guy was apprehended, and it was buttoned up, and then there was a posting made about what happened.
But if there's so I guess my question is, should we be directing all residents to Twitter? Because on November 5th, there was a tweet about it, but nothing showed up on the website till November 8th. So if it's good enough to be on Twitter, why is it not on the website?
So is the complaint the disconnect between the different social media?
Well, the disconnect is people don't know where to go to get the information.
They can go to a number of places. Again, I don't want to be argumentative. I'm not sure now is it the timeliness of the posting, or is it the mechanism?
Well, both. Both. If you're not on Twitter,
So-
which we have many
Yeah, I don't-
residents who are not on Twitter.
I don't, again, it's not an agenda item on tonight. I don't want to chew up too much of tonight's meeting, but the police department, in the middle of the night type of incident, they don't have, they're not worried about posting stuff online. That would be something that'll, again, if it's a situation where people are in danger or there's a larger communication, that's a whole different story. I'm referring specifically to the incident I think we're talking about. I'm just not sure that, well, actually, honestly, this, we have to have a larger discussion because I'm really not sure what the issue is.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we do this? It sounds like there is a substantive question, which, Jake, I'm going to suggest you can have a conversation with the staff offline about, and if after that it merits coming back to the next meeting, let us know. We'll add it to the agenda. We'll go there after staff's had a chance to put together a brief for us. Fair enough? Awesome. Okay. Moving on to item 3A, 904 Drexel Lane, waiver of the infiltration requirements of the Stormwater Management Ordinance. So my recollection is that we have seen this project in the past. I'm going to ask you very quickly, because I don't want to be redundant. This is a night where there's at least some chance we will get out before midnight. Tell us what is different this time from what was there last time, and in as few words as possible, make your case for why we're granting it tonight. Tell us why.
Okay, I guess I'll talk while we're getting our PowerPoint up here. So we made several changes. One is we added some additional trees to be planted. We made the rain garden larger. I had talked before about how we had kind of 4 different constraints between the pool, the property line, an easement, and a tree on the high side. We made the rain garden larger on the low side after I talked to Mr. Norsini and talked about how close we could get to the sanitary easement, so it got larger on that side. It also got larger on the high side by the tree. We did keep the tree, and we just kind of wrapped it around the tree, so we got a little smaller area. As a result, the rain garden got 38% larger. We also added a stone storage area underneath the rain garden. I believe Mrs. Borowski was asking about that last time, which is the area that's really, or volume that's in compliance with the DEP managed release concept. And so we have that stone bed underneath. We did rerun all of the calculations. We had, I believe it was a 72% reduction for, I think, the 2 and 5 year storm before. Now we have a 72% reduction all the way through the 50-year storm and a 71% reduction with the 100. I know Commissioner Booker had asked before about, asking for an even more reduction. As you can kind of see in the comparison here, at some point I can't get it any higher because I have to let water out. And so we made it much better for the higher storm events. So the 100-year storm went from 28% reduction to now a 71% reduction. So we more than doubled that. We also ran it for the 200, the 500, and 1,000-year storm and showed that it worked for all those storm events as well with at least a 20% reduction. So I think that's a very quick overview, but we're happy to answer other questions.
Before we get into questions, let me ask Steve, do you have any feedback or information for us on this?
Commissioner, as we've discussed before, there is no requirement of the ordinance. It's just when you can't infiltrate, you come to the board. And in this case, the resident and their engineer did come to the board previously. I believe they've covered the things that were asked by the board, right? The basin is larger. The stone storage, which our ordinance does not recognize, actually still does provide storage, as Mr. Yan noted. They were able to save the tree in doing so, and I think they've demonstrated a sizable reduction in the most frequent as well as less frequent storms.
Guys, have Adam.
So I would just like to start by thanking you for your patience, and it's my understanding, I've had conversations with Mrs. Wang, that you were working closely with our township engineer to get a better understanding of what could be possible on this site. I think that, we're talking about a family home where they just are looking to take down a current house that isn't working for their family right now and rebuilding on the same site. I would like to ask my fellow commissioners to join me in approving this.
So I'll vote for this, but I guess my concern is, this is all arbitrary. So if they're putting a family home together, that's fine, that's great, but that shouldn't be the reason that you vote for it or you vote against it. And the issue with stormwater is these waivers are arbitrary, period. So if you have a nice family or a mean family, unfortunately, that shouldn't affect this board at all. But you came back, and I believe that you made a good faith effort. You did your best, so I will vote for it. Thank you.
So I'll just say, and I appreciate you making the efforts up here, but you are coming to the board asking for a waiver. And so I look at, the project itself, and you added a lot of, you increased what you had on site. What you didn't touch was the square footage, and we can't make you touch the square footage, but again, you're asking this board for a waiver, and we do have a stormwater problem in the township. When we've had previous applicants come before the board, they've cut out part of their project to get board approval, and 99% of the time I voted against it. I voted for one because he considerably cut his project to get board support. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to vote for this. It sends the wrong message, and we're continuing to see flooding in Radnor Township, and it's because we continue to approve these waivers.
So I just want to say thank you for your efforts, and thank you for listening to the board. It is, we do need to redo our stormwater ordinance so that our residents don't run into these issues, and it is arbitrary in a way, so I do agree to that. But, I appreciate your efforts, and again, listening and making the changes, so I will be approving this.
Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? I'll call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. I think was that a pass? 5-2, okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to item 3B, we are skipping, it has been pulled. So item 3C, 2022 budget legislation. Sub A, ordinance 2021-16, introduction of the final 2022 comprehensive budget by setting the township real estate tax millage rate and adopting appropriations for 2022. I will so move. Is there a second? Commissioner comment?
Mr. President, if I could?
Sure, please.
Ian, I don't know if you could turn on the screens. Let's see if this works. There we go. So this is the ordinance that will ultimately adopt the 2022 budget. We have in both regular board meetings and a couple special meetings stepped through various topics throughout. What we worked on earlier today is establishing kind of a scorecard that identifies the various initiatives and recommendations, and then identifies, within whether the millage increase that was recommended is adopted or not, what can fit within the budget and what should probably wait until funding is authorized. So what we prepared here is there were several administrative staffing recommendations made. We had talked about the police OEM manager. That was the one that was prioritized administratively and recommended to the board for approval and incorporation in the 2022 budget.
if the millage increase is adopted, that would be something that would fit within the additional funding added as a result of the additional revenue. If not, then the recommendation would be to push that until, a future budget cycle when there is revenue to support the new position. The high-density beat officers, again, something that we prioritized. However, given the budget situation and the limit on how much we wanted to recommend in terms of millage increases, that was something that, we had presented, but let the board know that that's something that for a future budget cycle to consider, continue considering. Then we have our fire inspection program. At the last meeting, this is a position that I had recommended because of its requirement under the various codes that our community development department is required to inspect under, that we move forward with this. It was something that would be included with or without the millage, in so much as the board agrees to reassign the vacated health position in light of the county health program, and in light of the fact that we have a vacated position that this person could be hired under. So regardless of the millage, this is still something I would recommend we move forward with for 2022. We have our engineering sustainability / grant coordinator. This is tied back to the resolution 2021-32, which adopted the renewable energy plan. This is a position, the sustainability part of this position is tied to the adoption or the various action items that were called for as part of that plan. That was something that we would have been able to move forward with, or would move forward with an assumed July 1 start date for 2022. Without the millage, again, if it's not going to be funded, then it's something that we should revisit in the future, or use the example of where we were a year ago with the health department and the positions as they exist today. There might be other opportunities with any one of these positions, this one as well, where resources are freed up or we're able to reallocate. Then on the long-term planning initiatives, we have the comp plan update. This is one that regardless of where we end up on the vote for the millage increase is something that the township, at least in my recommendation, is something we should move forward with. It is, as we've discussed, the primary planning document that then lends itself to the zoning rewrites, as well as stormwater rewrites and the other ordinances that we've talked about in many different meetings that are in need of update. So we've included this amount in the 2022 budget, again, regardless of where we ultimately land with the millage increase. The next is the tree canopy program. There were several comments made under public comment last time that made a lot of sense. So regardless of where the board lands on the vote to increase the millage or not, this is something that seems like it would make a lot of sense to hand off to Shade Tree. They can work with Ricky Foster and our public works staff, develop the job description as well as the program guidelines and ultimately the goals of the program, and then make a recommendation to the board at some point in 2022. And then we can ultimately determine, or the board can ultimately determine, whether they're moving forward with it then, in the future, and then how much you wish to fund. So regardless, again, of the millage outcome, that is probably something that that is something we could move forward with no matter what. Radnor Fire Company ramp up. This was discussed in the special meeting at the end of September. The fire company had asked for an increase that included two components. $20,000 was for capital. Then there was $54,000 and some change that contemplated ramping up increased funding so that there is money set aside or there's not as big of an impact to the general fund in 3 years when the grant that the fire company was successful at obtaining for the additional personnel expires. at which time they will be required then to fund that personnel going forward. So if that additional $54,000 was included in the budget under the millage increase, without that, again, that's something, if we're not going to fund it, we should pause and rethink. At the last meeting, we had talked about, instead of sending that money to the fire company in advance, that's something that we could deposit in escrow here at the township for over that same time period, and then reevaluate when the grant expires, and then the board can ultimately determine at that point, how much of that money needs to go to the fire company going forward. But again, if the millage increase is not something that we'll adopt, then that's probably a discussion for a future day. And then the next three are all capital related. We have the capital funding plan, which represents the cash projects only. Those are today's infrastructure projects, curbs, sidewalks, intersections, park improvements, or park facility replacements, not even improvements, just replacing assets that already exist, trails. That allocation would be for those types of projects. That's not really, again, that's going to be a significant amount. It's not really, in terms of funding, something that there's been a whole lot of appetite for today. The amount of funding and the projects themselves haven't been discussed and vetted fully yet. So that's something that, at this point, we're recommending to continue evaluating next year. Doesn't need to be something part of the 2022 budget. I would add to that it's not that there aren't projects going on. I think Steve would attest, and Tammy as well, to the number of projects that are included in past borrowings that we continue to work on, as well as the additional stormwater projects that were added this year as part of the stormwater funding plan. So it's not like there's not projects that need to be wrapped up, bond proceeds that need to be spent down. So there's plenty of work there to be done, and we can focus on those projects and getting that money spent and those projects installed while we continue to evaluate this plan going forward. We had talked again at the September the meeting held at the end of September, the special meeting about the Park Impact Fee Fund. There's currently $374,000 and change in that fund. We know there's at least one or two more deposits coming. The funds in that, or the dollars in that fund can only be used specifically towards park and rec improvements. So while there's no recommended or funded capital on the general side, there is money to be spent next year on park improvements. Park improvements, so long as it doesn't exceed the amount in the fund. So the recommendation at this point, again, regardless of the millage outcome, because this money is already in the fund and available to be spent, that this is something that perhaps the Parks Board can work with Tammy and her staff and come up with recommendations early in 2022 and get that to the board then for ultimate decision and spending, again, early in 2022. And then the last item here we had talked about at that September special meeting is a facilities bond. There's no impact to the 2022 budget on that, regardless of how we proceed. Where we're at with that is the need for a much larger discussion about those facilities, the need and the amounts, as well as the plan moving forward. We wanted to include them on the scorecard here, but again, that's not something that will be impacted by the vote on the millage. Then the last piece was the fund balance, the general fund balance policy, which is in 4410 of the Township Code. We had earmarked or discussed an allocation of $300,000 of the increased millage that would have been earmarked for fund balance restoration. Without the millage increase, there isn't $300,000 that's identifiable. There's not to say there won't be variances that will allow for savings, but it's not something that would be a specific line item in the budget without the funding. So that's something that we would have to continue to evaluate going forward on how we want to restore that fund balance in the general fund. So hopefully, and then lastly, just wanted to circle back on our outside organizations. What's included in the 2022 budget as proposed are the amounts that were requested by each of the entities. And at this point, the recommendation would be to move forward with those funding amounts with two notable exceptions. First of all, with the Radnor Fire Company, if the vote on the millage is to hold at the same level as 2021, then we would recommend only adding the $20,000 to their capital allocation. And the reason why we're making that recommendation is that the amount that we contribute to Radnor Fire for capital has been the same for the last 10 years. It's been $200,000 a year. It's part of what they've asked for annually. It is reasonable to expect the cost of that equipment to go up over time. And the fact that we've held steady with $200,000 for 10 years has been a success, but it's not unreasonable to assume that the 220 is not an unreasonable request or assumption for the additional monies needed. Similarly, the Bryn Mawr Fire Company made the same request as it pertains to capital. So we're recommending that we proceed with that as well. The other exception is, we discussed at the last special meeting with regard to the Wayne Arts Center, is the option to formally cancel or do the necessary ordinance to cancel the bond repayment agreement that the Wayne Arts Center had entered into with the township when the bonds were originally issued, in a similar fashion as the library did back in 2010. That, if the board wanted to proceed with that, I would recommend that be in lieu of contributing any operational dollars to the Arts Center, because as we had talked about at the last meeting, the repayment amounts on an annual basis are in the ballpark of $70,000 per year for the next 13 years, whereas they had been receiving 20, they had asked for 150 for 2022. So the Art Center ends up, a little bit ahead of where they've been in prior years, and under that scenario, it's a funding contribution from the commissioners that would not be necessary going forward.
Bill, sorry to interrupt. What's the total amount that we owe, or that the Wayne Arts Center owes? Is it 150? Is that the total amount, or is that just what they want forgiven?
So the principal amount is just about $800,000.
Is $800,000, and they're asking for $150,000 forgiven?
Well, the amount that they've asked for as part of their operating budget, or their request to the commissioners, they had made that $150,000 request separate of any consideration with regard to the repayment agreement. That was mentioned at that meeting, and something that we looked into. Again, to treat them in a similar fashion as we did the library. So that's why that recommendation is being made.
And Bill,
Sorry, thank you. So that 150, is that going forward? Are we going to forgive the whole loan, or are we going to, so will that 150 just be for 2022, or is it going to be another 150 for 2023, or we forgive the 150 and they're not going to ask for money for the next, I'm just going to say 7.5 years at $20,000 a pop? Does that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I apologize if I wasn't clear a moment ago. So the $150,000 is mutually exclusive of the bond repayment amount. When we had sent out the requests for 2022 to each of the entities, the Wayne Arts Center came back and asked for $150,000 for 2022. Whether that is perpetual, I don't know what it looks like in 23, 24. Their historical amount that was received from the commissioners has been $20,000. So I can't predict what they would ask for in future years. But if we eliminate the repayment agreement, then the $20,000 or $100,000, any contribution made to the Art Center theoretically well, I would recommend they not be approved, because by forgiving the loan, the township's taking on that responsibility. And I wouldn't recommend doing both.
Bill, can I just ask, in the budget, did you guys put the 20,000 in or the 150? Like, what are we looking at now?
Yeah, I wasn't clear on that either.
We had initially put the 20,000 in, so 20,000.
Okay. So the 150, we would, if we were going to do that, would be on top of what we've already got?
Yes.
So I'm going to guess that that would lead to, that would be under a millage increase? I mean, we're not going to find $150,000.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
That's
So
how
in
I'd
order to
recommend it.
fund that, we would need to do a millage increase?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I have two comments and I have a question. Not in that order, I guess. The first comment that I want to make is that I think the process that you guys went through in order to get us here is a really important departure from what we have sometimes done in previous years. Instead of picking the amount of tax increase or lack of an increase that you wanted the board to focus on and then shoehorning all the operations into that, you've taken the opposite approach and said, here's what we need to do in order to run the township in the most efficient and effective way possible, and here's what it's going to cost. Board of Commissioners, you're making a decision from this menu of options of things that we think would be important for the township. I don't know if we're going to end up passing the budget that you have asked us for, but I think it's incredibly important that you guys continue doing exactly that, because if we don't get exactly the millage increase you're asking for this year, when you come back to us next year and you say, now we're kind of in crisis mode, I asked you about this last year, it's going to have a lot more force, at least for me, and I suspect for others. When we get these no tax increase budgets year after year after year, and then we ask the question, well, why is it that we don't have a sewer system that works, and why is it that we have roads that are falling apart, and why is it that, this, that, and the other thing? You're like, well, you didn't pay for those things. When you come to us and tell us the actual cost of the services and products that we have to buy, it is incredibly helpful. The next thing I'm going to say, which totally undercuts that a little bit, but I still hope that you'll continue doing that, is I am very uncomfortable passing a tax increase this year. And the reason why is because the township has just had a massive tax assessment massive reappraisal, which has affected many people's property tax payments. It is disproportionately falling, disproportionately is maybe not a good word. It is falling on many homeowners. And I know that for a lot of people, this is not going to make the difference that we passed this year. I think you told us the median increase was going to be like $20 per household or something. The $20 is not going to be what breaks the bank. It's that if you keep doing it year after year, it normalizes it, and then you end up paying $100 and then $200 and then et cetera. We're also still in the middle of a COVID pandemic. My kids are not vaccinated. They can't be because they're under 5, and that really limits my ability to go out. I'm not in the office more than 1 or 2 days a week. There are people who this is continuing to affect. I'm uncomfortable doing that. I am not going to move to amend this ordinance now. Instead, I'd like to have a discussion with the ordinance as it is drafted, with the understanding that I'm probably a no vote on that. If it does not pass, then I would submit the amendment. I don't want to derail the conversation. I want to give this a fair shot, and then afterwards we can talk about a no increase budget. My question, and this is largely for John. John, I assume that we would not need to today call balls and strikes on the ultimate line items in the budget. Instead, we would be amending or not the ordinance, and then at the next meeting when we pass the ordinance, staff would come to us with a proposed amended budget. Is that right?
Jack, I'm not sure about your question. You have this ordinance up for introduction tonight.
Correct. We have the ordinance that's up for introduction, which sets the millage rate, but then in addition to that, the presentation that Bill just gave us was, here's a list of the line items that with the millage increase you can afford, and without the millage increase you cannot. if we were to go through tonight and say, I want the fire company, but not the library, I want the comprehensive plan, but not the tree canopy program, and those are totally random selections. I think that we're going to be here forever, and I don't know that we're going to reach a consensus. I'm hoping that what we can do is introduce a millage rate today, have staff come back to us with a recommended budget based on that millage increase or not at the next meeting.
When do we vote on the next meeting?
Well,
I mean, do we vote on the budget at the next meeting, or when do we vote on the budget?
This is the introduction, so we'll have to vote for it, I think.
But don't you have to?
At the next meeting, so my question is, you're going to say, well, you don't want to talk about the budget, but when we have it in front of us, then we can talk about it? I think we should say what we like and what we don't like, so we can have, as you said, a menu with different options, and we may be here a little bit later, but
That's fine, we can talk about it, I just don't want to vote on it today. I don't
Oh,
think we
no,
have
no,
to
no, well.
introduce the budget.
So don't we have to vote, don't we have to introduce, we have to vote on the same thing that's introduced? So unless we do an amendment vote in the, as we're voting on the final budget. But we can't introduce this with some caveats. It's either amended and voted on.
Once you introduce, that basically triggers it to be advertised. So it'll be advertised, it'll come back to you on the 22nd in a hearing, like any other ordinance. And you can make some changes to it at that point. You might need to re-advertise it, depending on what you do on the 22nd.
But we don't have to advertise the actual line item budget, do we? It's like 1,000 pages long.
Well, this ordinance has attached to it the budget.
Are we going to advertise the budget?
Well, whatever is attached to the ordinance, including the budget, gets basically advertised. I mean, we don't summarize the entire budget, but it gets lodged at the newspaper along with the legal ad.
Okay, so we do actually have to go through line by line and decide what we want to keep or get rid of today, if we don't pass the ordinance as proposed? I can see
Correct.
Bill thinking like, make him do it, he wants to get out of here.
Well, you're going to...
So the question is, do we have to vote on it as introduced here with the millage increase, or can we modify that and still count that and vote for it as introduced without the millage increase?
Yeah, it'll come back. What you're introducing tonight will be advertised. Okay?
And that can be with millage or without millage?
Correct. Whatever you do in terms of the introduction gets advertised. That comes back to you then for a hearing, and then you can make some changes to it at that point. It may need to re-advertise it, depending on how substantial the changes are.
In that case, I will quickly say, if we were to amend it, I would be perfectly happy to accept Bill's recommendations about what we would or would not include without the millage increase. I would note, I probably would not support the stepped-up payment for the Radnor Fire Company as part of a smoothing mechanism. I'm not sure that this is the year that I want to take money out of people's pockets in order to save it for later so that they don't notice a subsequent increase as much as they might otherwise. I don't love the fact that we would be going over $1 million, which is an important threshold for me. And the best case scenario is that the fire company is able to get another grant to pay for those positions. They are being funded by grants right now. I'd kind of like to incentivize them to go out and get those grants rather than knowing that the money is right there waiting for them whenever they need to have it. I'm not sure that we've really had the conversation about how necessary those 2 additional people are with the fire company. I anticipate I know what they would tell me if I asked the question, but I have concerns about that. I would be uncomfortable with that. But otherwise, I'm perfectly happy to accept Bill's recommendations. But I've been talking for a while now. Somebody else is in charge.
But Bill's recommendations take into account that there will be an increase in the millage rate and a tax increase. So you've now said 2 things. You can't get everything that Bill wants to do without raising taxes.
Well,
And I'm sorry, Bill,
There's
I'm using Bill as in the township staff as presented.
There's a column that says without millage increase.
That's what I understood.
Yeah, so if maybe in this, I hope this helps. It may actually complicate the discussion more. So it sounds like the first decision is what the board would like to do with the millage. Based on that discussion or that decision, The ordinance can be amended accordingly for introduction. Then it would be helpful to know in the column of without budget increases, the X's and checks, if the board agrees or disagrees with any of those specific line items. That'll help us finalize the line item budget so that when John, or solicitor advertises the ordinance, the correct budget is attached with it. So it'd be decision on the millage first, and then that'll tell us which column of the checks and X's that we're focusing on, and then the board can advise on which of those are a go or not a go.
Commissioner Larkin, your light is on. Are you speaking still, or, okay. So I actually kind of, I don't know, I think it's a chicken or the egg scenario. Do we talk about the millage rate, or do we talk about what we want to fund? I personally would rather talk about what we want to fund, and then we adjust the millage rate thereafter. And to Commissioner Larkin's point, it has been a very tough year. We were at this junction last year, and we're like, oh, we're going to make changes, we're going to make changes, we're going to get ahead of it, and the answer is no, we did not get ahead of it. So there's some fairly difficult line items here that that I want to talk about, but before I do want to talk about it, Bill, what is going to be, we need to keep a 25% fund balance. So do you have those numbers with the increase in taxes or without the increase of taxes? Are we going to be compliant with keeping the 25% on both of them?
Well, yeah, under no circumstances, with or without, even with the millage increase, will we restore the fund balance back up to to being compliant with the compliance with the fund balance policy.
How short will we be?
Somewhere in the $2.5 million range. So
about 20%.
Yeah, well, two quick caveats to that is, first of all, given the amount that we've had to spend down because of the impact in 2020 to revenues, as well as the residual effects this year, it was assumed, I think it's reasonable to assume that it will take some time to get the fund balance back up to be in compliance. Not something that we would fix immediately. I'm not sure there's an appetite for a tax adjustment necessary to do that. So that's the first thing, is that I would see any option being that it's going to take some time. The second thing is part of where we're forecasting is how we're going to end 2021. That's why the amount is, that's why I gave a range, or a ballpark, so $2.5 million. If we could do better, we could, well, as we sit here today, in all likelihood, we will end 2021 better than budgeted. It's just the exact amount, I'm not sure. It could be a couple $100,000. We could do better. It's going to depend on the last couple of months here. But
okay.
So that's a long way of explaining that, you know, the fund balance policy is important, and it is something that is critical to our fiscal resiliency. But I also recognize the fact that it's going to take some time.
Okay. No, and that's fine. I do look at that fund balance as a means to our bond rating. Our bond rating keeps our interest rates low, and we get to refinance them all the time, and you guys do a great job saving us money. So this is the hard ask. And I said this at the last meeting. Surrey Services, the library, the Wayne Arts Center, the Wayne Senior Center, they get to do something that this board does not do, and that is fundraise. If we want to fundraise, we have to raise taxes. I am not for a tax increase, although a very marginal one. It unfortunately may be appropriate when you see the increase in materials, gas, anywhere. But it's going to hurt our seniors and hurt people on fixed income, people that have lost jobs or are struggling. So here are a couple big issues, or big, I don't want to say issues, but when I look at your paper, here's just some things that jump out at me. Surrey Services, they want $20,000. I'm sorry, $35,000. On their sheet, it's 236 people that they help represent. That's about $150 a person. Surrey's cash right now, according to their financial statement, is $539,000. Their assets, their investments, $2.057 million. They have enough money. It's going to hurt us. That $35,000 is going to hurt us much more than it's going to hurt them. And Surrey does not even operate in this township. That's not to say that they don't do good work. They do. But unfortunately, these are tough decisions, so we need to look at that. 35,236 people in the township. The Wayne Arts Center, and that is just, that's a big number to choose whether or not to start forgiving their debt. They want $20,000 this year. The numbers that I have from the Wayne Arts Centers, they have $441,000 in cash and $609,000 in assets. So I don't think that $20,000 is going to make or break them, at least not this year. But the toughest one is the library. And everyone loves the library, and the library fundraises. They have a great board. The library wants close to $1 million. Now they're sitting on $1 million in cash and $5.5 million in investments in stocks, bonds, mutual funds. I think it's time that we ask some of these large institutions, or maybe not institutions, these nonprofits, to help with us, essentially feel our pain. I would make recommendations, while not popular, to cut the library from $960,000 to $480,000, to cut the Wayne Senior Center from $145,000 to $72,000, to cut the Wayne Art Center from $20,000 to $10,000, and unfortunately to cut Surrey Services $35,000. That would give us, the township, an additional approximately $585,000. Now, it's not to say that these organizations may not need that money in the future. If that's the case, they can come to the board, and we should try to help them. But for us to dole this money out while we're cutting services here, it does not make any sense to me. It's not fair to our taxpayers if we're going to ask them to pay more. So I will be in favor of a marginal, very marginal tax increase if we can wind up cutting part of this $585,000. That's money that we can use, that's real money, and if these organizations need it in the future, they can come back to us. Maybe we could set up a meeting in June to see how they're doing, and we can give them that difference. And there are other areas that we should look at as well, which is the Willows. I don't know, I haven't seen their financials. I know that we don't have we have two members, citizen members to the board. I don't know if we've ever had them. I know that they had a fundraiser, but again, when it comes out to what they're bringing in versus their burn rate, I would like to see that as well. So I think that there is actually a lot of money here, but we have to make some hard choices, and we're going to have to tell some of our friends, like, hey, this is uncomfortable, but this is the right thing to do for the 30,000 constituents that live here in Radnor. Some that don't, that may pay mercantile tax, et cetera. So that's kind of really where I'm at. We can have a tax increase, that's fine, but I think that we really need to start looking at cutting some of these organizations, and it is very unfortunate. Thank you.
Well, Sean, it sounds like if you made those cuts, then you would be able to fund the other things without a tax increase. That's kind of what I heard, but I'll let you do that.
There you go.
And Bill, the way I'm looking at this, if we say that there is no tax increase as a board, then we pretty much go with column B on what we have, right? There's not, the way I read this, is there flexibility? If we don't have a tax increase, then we only get to keep the green checks.
Yeah, well, recall that the budget as presented for 2022 included today's operational levels for all the departments as they exist today. So yes, we would continue operating as we do today. And then the three items that have the check marks are either budget neutral or it's the comp plan, where I just think we're at a point where we've got to get that moving forward because it's going to take years from the word go to get that done. So we're really not in the luxury of, I don't think, waiting much longer. So I don't know if that answered directly your question, but the ones that I've included as yeses without a millage increase are budget neutral, or they don't impact the general fund, like the Park Impact Fee Fund. That's not money coming out of the general fund, so that's not funded with taxes. That's money already contributed into that fund by payments in lieu of through developments over the last couple of years. And that money can be spent on park and needs to be spent on park improvements, so.
Bill, a little bit more information about that fund. Were you done, Commissioner Booker?
Well, no, I was going to go through all my questions, but if you have something.
Just briefly on that fund. Is that, does that fund increase or is that a static amount because those are negotiated pilot agreements?
No, the only deposits that are made to that fund are any kind of development in Radnor where the developer chooses to make the payment in lieu of installing park facilities. So I think in most cases, our developers are choosing the payment in lieu of, and that's where those deposits are coming from. It's not anything that we could sit here today and predict what it might look like next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. And once, if there's not another single development in Radnor, once that 374 and change is spent, it's done. It doesn't replenish automatically.
Thanks, that's what I was looking for.
So that's not funded by fees from permits?
Not ongoing fees. They're one-time payments at the time the development agreement is signed.
So they will replenish that?
Yeah, I mean, reasonably speaking, yes, there will be future developments that require folks to pay into the fund. It's just, we can't sit here today and predict what that might look like.
And this stays in if there's no tax increase, and that 374 goes to evaluate and recommend project in early 20, it got cut off here, 22, I guess that says.
Yeah, there should be another two floating out there.
Okay. So on the top rows, the first one was the OEM manager for what's OEM again?
The Office of Emergency Management.
Okay. 125,000. So so we want to have a permanent Office of Emergency Management so we're always going to have an emergency from now on?
Yeah, the rationale behind that recommendation is not that we always have an emergency going on, but when there isn't an emergency going on, that person can make sure that we're doing the necessary steps to be prepared for the next emergency, regardless of what it is, whether that's a weather-related one or a man-made one through a shooting incident or something.
A lab leak from Wuhan, whatever.
A tractor trailer with chemicals spilling over in the middle of Wayne. Like it could be anything. But
it's so broad, though, Bill, to have somebody that's going to be out there getting ready for any. I mean, it's so broad. It's so hard for someone to do that. I kind of would feel. When you have emergency, we need to address the emergency to try to anticipate and to have in the budget. I'm just not comfortable with that. Then the next one, I suppose, just thinking about, there's guys like Bill Gates who are working on these pandemic. Bill Gates has worked on pandemics for multiple years, and so he was ready for this. So that's funny. But
it's a little different than what we're
okay. All right. So I don't know. Maybe that's what you're thinking. I don't. But that's unusual. I think it's kind of too broad, too much to ask, and probably not. My view would be not to vote for that. The next thing would be the ComDev fire inspector. It's going to be either way, so you think you need that. The other one was the sustainability grant coordinator. Again, can you go through what that position is? Because that also is significant. When we put new people, and you've heard me say this before, but maybe I'm going to repeat it for the public. When you put new people into these positions, it's not the $65,000 for 1 year. It's the $65,000 at 4% plus burden for the next 30 years and the next 60 years when that person goes. It never ends. You never get rid of that. So it's it's not just 65, it's 65 plus forever. And again, the role is so all-encompassing that I'm concerned about that. It seems like we could have consultants take care of what we need, and then we pay them hourly and whatever it costs, and then they're off the payroll. So go through, what is the sustainability grants writing person, and where would we even find somebody like that?
Bill, I have just one follow-up to that. Is that 65,000 all in with benefits, or is that just his salary is 65,000?
So a couple things. First of all, I'll deal with the financial aspect. And Commissioner Booker, you're exactly right in terms of the ongoing cost of these additional personnel items, which is why, I'm showing one column here, but in our other presentations, we were presenting, 22, 23, 24, 25. Because I do agree that, these decisions are multi-year and they shouldn't be made in one-year vacuums. So I appreciate that, and it is something that we've built into the forecasting for future years. The 65 assumes a higher date roughly mid-year. So that's a half a year all-in cost. Going forward, that position's estimated to be about $120,000. That's wages and benefits. The rationale behind the need goes back to the resolution that the board adopted earlier this year that adopted the renewable energy plan and the various action items that were included in that. When that resolution was considered and adopted, the discussion was, and the recommendation was, I thought, pretty clear that in order for us to be successful at implementing that plan, an additional resource would be needed. So that's where the sustainability piece of that position comes in. Then to your point about the workload, it is reasonable to assume that just focusing on that plan and sustainability type of engagements and action items probably is not a full-time job. So we married that with the need of having someone on staff that is a dedicated grant coordinator, someone that is actively pursuing grants, not just for sustainability, although that would be their primary focus, but grants in all areas of what we do, whether it be stormwater or parks and recreation or public works, police, or any kind of infrastructure capital project. So any one of those areas, this person would be our point in seeking those out, doing as much of the application as possible. Granted, now, if it's a very technical type of a grant, we probably still will need some consultant help. No matter who we hire, they're not going to have all the expertise needed for all the grant applications. But we retain those services now for the grants that we do apply for. So that's the rationale behind that position. I'm confident that if we had the resource, there are enough grants and we have enough projects and operations and areas of our business that have grant opportunities that there will be additional money available and we will realize some of it, and that will only help either move those projects forward or defray costs that we would spend otherwise.
I appreciate that. I would push back on that and say that it's so broad and the expertise is so unlikely to be residing within one person that we need the outside help anyway. And I would push back and say, let's focus on the outside help and having experts that are available that we can realize those opportunities when they arise. Also, you recall I voted against the sustainability resolution. I think it's unrealistic, and you know, the world uses 100 million barrels of oil a day. We can't keep this building heated without oil and natural gas. I can't keep my house heated, and I think it's unrealistic and not something that we should pursue, and is unlikely to be achieved with or without this or more people being hired. The next item.
Well, can I offer one quick rebuttal to that, just on the grant side? Is that, you know, we have the hired consultants, and they do a good job in applying for the grants, but they're not out there looking for them. We have to initiate them to go and apply for a grant, and that's where we fall short. It's not, you know, the consulting companies that help us are waiting for us to pull the trigger for them to get to work. What this position would do is flip that to where we have someone constantly looking and seeking them out to fill out the application. And those are expenses we're making today anyway. So that part of it would not be an additional expense. It would just change the focus from reactive to more proactive.
Understood. My response to that is that these people who are seeking out this work, maybe we could work with them so that they are more proactive in seeking out the opportunities and bringing them to us so that we could then authorize the work. And a lot of consultants will do that type of thing because they know that it ends up in commissions. The next item is the community development comp plan. Now, this is little known to this board, but something that several years ago I did have on my list of most important items to do is a new comp plan. And, you know, where I hate to spend $100,000 on yet another document, this is something that I have raised because we have so many times at these meetings where we focus on these individual land use items, and we have community groups and others, and we have these limited changes, and we haven't done this really, the 2000 plan modified in 2008. I would recommend for this board that there is some move at a holistic review of the comprehensive land use plan, and that there be some kind of continuity in how we tie together and some thought in going forward on the comprehensive plan for the township, because right now it's piecemeal and it's political, and we end up oftentimes making decisions that are focused on a smaller area and may or may not take into consideration the larger. So I agree with what you have there, Bill, with the two. I keep wanting to say blue check marks because of Twitter, but these are green check marks. So I like that. I think you need to do that. And then I'm still not clear on the Park Impact Fund, but it's got green on both. Now, with respect to Jack and Sean's issue, I did discuss with Eamon Brazunas. I never had anybody else with that name before. I don't think I'll ever see anybody that has that name with Eamon Brazunas. And he talked to me about this issue. And I understood the issue. I remember at the time when these grants are made, these are federal grants, and they go for 3 or 5 years? It's 5 years, and this is for manning. It's for staffing, right? 5-year grant. And these grants are designed to end so that by the time they end, the federal government is saying, yep, go ahead and pick them up or let it drop, and we dare you to let it drop. That's what that is. That's a throwing down of the gauntlet. We dare you to not keep funding this. So we're going to fund it for 5 years. You're going to have that person, and there's no way we think you're going to let that drop. And if you do, then God bless you. See what happens to you if you drop that. So I think it's an unfair position to be put in. And I understand Eamon's request to build into the budget, to ramp up with the budget so that when that grant falls away, that it's not a major impact, that it is something that we have built in and that the position is there. But unusually, Jack Larkin has made a very good point, which I agree with at the same time. So I agree with both of them. So I have to decide on where we come out with that. Usually I come out with not spending money. But I think it's something to consider because the grants are going to end. We have the people. I guess I'm more inclined right now, although I was inclined to build up that fund for the future. I'm less inclined since we put aside money for paying volunteers a stipend. So that makes me less inclined to have a fund build up to pay for a person when the grants disappear. Just the way I come down on it. Let me take first the Wayne Arts Center. I don't think it's fair to everybody else. We have several other entities that are paying back. Well, the fire company is. The fire company paid back their whole thing.
Yeah, they did, and it's paid off.
It's paid off. So I don't think it's a good practice to say, oh, we're just going to waive this. And what did you say was the amount per year that they want to waive on the Wayne?
It's roughly $70,000 a year.
$70,000 a year.
So we had one that paid it off and another one that we forgave. So this would be.
Yeah,
I mean, the rubber match.
I like the Art Center. I think it's great. I like the plein air. You know, people, it's a great place. They do a lot of stuff. They've always asked for $20,000. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and it's always been $15,000 or $20,000. You know, it's kind of, no, we're not going up to $150,000 this year, and let alone waiving the 70. I appreciate what Sean did. He went and looked up what the assets, and you know, they seem to be sufficient to cover it. So I would leave that at the 20, and I would leave the library didn't even ask for any more money, you know, and the library, I look at the library and look at the 501c3 that runs the library. I think that saves us money. If we had the township staff running the library, I think that would cost us more than this $960,000 that they asked for. That's my view on it. And it doesn't really I mean, they need that $5 million. And they put in, Sean, they put in $1 million or so into that $7 million project several years. So they used a portion of their reserves. What do you call those things? You call those endowment. Yeah. So
well, there's a fine line between 480 and 960.
And they are, so just FYI, to your point, Rich, they are using, they're increasing their endowment draw this year because they kept, you know, they asked for flat funding.
Yeah.
They are experiencing a 4.5% increase. And I have these numbers, and I want to thank Joyce Plattfoot for providing this to me because I thought this conversation might come up. But they did ask for flat funding, but they are experiencing a 4.5% increase, and that's mainly around employment compensation as well as expenses due to building repairs and maintenance.
A brand new building, though.
Well, there are some issues with it. So they are, you know, dealing with some of those. But so they are drawing on their endowment. They've set an aggressive fundraising target and are using reserves as necessary. So, but however, that's not going to be sustainable for a nonprofit that does a run, which brings in significant amount of funding, but that's not going to fund their entire budget, nor is that going to, I think, take the place of us cutting, and I forget what you suggested, Commissioner Farhi, cutting it by, nor is a bake sale going to make that money. And I agree with Commissioner Booker that if we had to run the library, which most municipalities do run the library, it would cost us a significant amount more to do so. So, the library, I think, is, I think that they're very well managed. I think they're doing a very good job, but are certainly experiencing increases like everybody else. But this year, worked hard to not pass that along to the township and asked for flat funding.
All right, well, let me just finish. I agree with that, so it's flat. I would keep that in there. So, Bill, the $1,050,377 for the Radnor Fire Company, does that have the amounts that we talked about? Is that building up the fund to replace, or does that not include that? I can't remember.
So yeah, the 74,572 increase over what they received in 2021 includes both the $20,000 increase in the capital as well as the first year ramp up of 54,572. So yes, it includes both.
54. I thought we were talking about half of that amount.
54,572 for 3 years.
For 3 years. Well,
So
why
it'd be
not take it?
108. I mean, it ramps up to 160, 170,000 by the third year.
Can we restructure that so that it's kind of a sinking fund that it earns? So we try to pick up maybe 3, 4, or 5 years.
Well, as proposed, that amount would go into an account in our escrow fund.
Right.
It's not going to earn a great deal of interest, but it'll earn some. And then in 3 years, there'll be, $160,000 there. Presumably, the fire company will come to the township and say that our contributions need to be $160,000 higher now that the grant is gone and we have to fund this staff. We'll have that money in escrow so we can use that at that point to help ease the amount necessary from the general fund that goes to the fire company. So I don't know if that accomplishes the sinking fund concept that you're thinking about, but it would be money set aside for that purpose.
Well, by that point, it's already in the budget.
Yeah, so the annual contribution, so the ramped up amount of, I'll say 160,000, instead of going to the escrow fund, that'll go to the fire company, presumably. They would still have to come and ask, and the board at the time will have to approve it, but presumably that would go to the fire company, and we'd have the money sitting in the escrow that the board could decide what to do with, either reduce the amount that goes to the fire company out of the general fund or return all of that to the general fund.
Well, the problem is going to be that if they need 150,000, there's only 160,000 there. So I can't remember, were they going to need only 54,000? So that did we say was that the fifth year or the third year? What year did you say? It's the third year. You said 3 years, right? 3 years. So
3 years of ramping up.
The fourth year, how much is the actual need? Is it 54,000?
Yeah, no, so it'll be 200,000 higher, so 54 times 4. So 200,000 plus higher in year 4.
In year 4, they'll need 200. I thought they were going to need only the 54,000 in year 4, and we were going to spend it down.
So what we're trying to do is, instead of having, let's assume that there's no other expenses going to the fire company, so $200,000, it would go 54, 108, 160, 200. So that in year 4, the general fund's not going from 0 to 200 in 1 year. It is ramping itself up over the next 3 years to get there.
And then when it ramps itself up, it never goes away. It's there, stuck forever.
Well, as long as, I mean, as we talked about with
So
personnel
basically,
earlier,
this is
yeah.
3 people. I thought it was only 1 person. So it's really basically 3 people getting a grant right now, and then when that ends, we'll need to cover it.
Well, I mean, that's the presumption today. What we don't know is what fire company funding will look like in 4 years. We had talked about at the last meeting that there could be changes in, the fire company and how they bill for ambulance. That could change and increase the amount of available funding there.
Yeah, that's a tough
Although
one.
that's gone the other way over years.
And then what about Bryn Mawr? How come, what is their, are they just jumping in on the bandwagon here and trying to get another 20,000, or is that, what's the need there?
Yeah, well, both Bryn Mawr and Fire, we've contributed the same amounts to both of those fire companies for the last 9 or 10 years. We contribute a consistent amount to capital, and that amount has been consistent for 9 or 10 years. So what both companies have asked for is a bump up to that contribution for capital.
Well, I would probably keep the 20,000 and then agree with Commissioner Larkin, mark it down. This 54, let's start it next year. That's what I would do with that 54. You guys start it next year. So I would, in light of all the stuff that we need, so I'm pretty much on the bandwagon of no new increase and make what we have work.
So I'm going to
Thank
jump
you.
in now.
Done.
Thank you, Commissioner Booker. I think you and I agree that I'm tending to lean towards no increase. And I think I have a couple of thoughts about shuffling the deck on a couple of these. So I actually, if I were to have to choose between a fire inspector and the OEM manager position, I think we'd be better served with the OEM manager position. I can appreciate all of the presentations that we received, but you've been tying together the reallocation of the health position to only the fire inspector during this whole conversation. I don't think we should limit it to that. I mean, to me, it doesn't have to be on that same line in that same department. So I've been saying that all along. So I think that the money that we're saving on no longer having the health inspector, I would like to see in emergency management. I do believe that having a risk management professional on staff to talk about things that are as broad as when the police have to think about active shooting versus what's going to happen if we have another health crisis. So, it's overall risk management. I think that's an important professional consideration that we should have in the township. So, the without millage, that check mark would switch for me. I also feel very strongly that we do need the comprehensive plan. So very much in favor of that. And I guess I'm just looking at the check marks. People have said a lot of things about other elements that you're not recommending to go forward without millage. But the one I would speak to is the ramp up for funding with the fire department. It just seems to me, whether we're holding it in escrow or giving it to them, it's spending money that we don't know if we're going to have to spend at a time where, we're already saying no to really good, well thought out proposals. So I would be against that regardless of whether we had a millage increase or not. And there seem to have been some questions about a grant writer. I'm very much in favor of that. I have been in that position at a major institution in my past, and the proactive approach to finding grants makes a marked difference. If you have somebody who is there, and also an in-house person brings much more value than hiring it out, because you can persuasively speak to the needs of the township in a way that somebody hired just to fill in the appropriate boxes on an application would not be able to do. So very much in favor of that position, and I like that it is a way for us to move forward on our commitment to sustainability in some in at least a step forward. I think those were my main points about that top section. And as far as the community funding, I feel like we really do have a couple of buckets, and the fire companies and the library sit, for me, in a similar situation. Those are services. One is important safety. The other is a community service that I believe a township would really be lacking if we didn't have such a nice public library. So I see those as services that are really the responsibility of this township to provide. The others, you know, I can separate out sort of the basic needs services, the senior center in Surrey, from the Wayne Art Center and the Historical Society, which I think are not quite as, you know, they are not as sustaining of the basic needs of our residents in the same way, although I'm a big fan of both. But as, you know, if we could stick closely to the funded amount from this year and move that forward with still keeping the bottom line in mind, I am for funding community organizations. I don't think the capital for the Art Center is probably in the cards this year. And I'm not, the suggestion to forgive the debt seems to me that I understand we did it for the library, but again, I personally put the library in a different category of need for the community, so I would not be for forgiving that and would stick with just the smaller contribution. I think those are most of my points. Thank you.
Are you done, Commissioner Warren? Can I just jump in? Okay. Sorry, Jake. Just a quick point, Commissioner Borowski. You said that the library is drawing down some of their investments. Is that correct?
With this year's budget, yes.
Okay. Because I have last year's budget where they had.
I'm not talking about last year's
Well,
budget. I'm
well,
talking
okay.
about this year's budget
Sure,
because
but I
they
wanna-
asked for
okay,
flat
well, I
funding,
just
and this
wanna-
is how they're able to do that.
Sure. I
But
want to
thank
just
you
go
for your
through the
points.
numbers. Okay. Well, you're welcome. You're very welcome. I want to go through those numbers. I'm actually going to put them up on the board so people at home can see.
Is your point I think you've already made your point about wanting to cut the library budget, and I don't think that I'm hearing consensus on the board for your opinion.
You don't need I don't need consensus to speak, but Ian, if you could put this up, my point. Okay.
We do normally
All right.
let everybody speak before we return to
I think that you need to let everyone else speak before you go through your.
Abel, do you mind if while I'm up, or I can?
And I haven't spoken yet either, neither has Commissioner.
Well, I yielded my time, so.
So all I'm saying is that if you look here, they have $1.4 million more in assets from last year to this year. And that's something that needs to be said. So you're saying that they're drawing down their assets, and I'm saying that's not the case. Their assets, especially their investments.
For the 2022 budget, they are drawing down on their endowment. It will not be reflected in last year's.
It looks to increase
numbers.
by about 1.4 million.
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
All right, reclaiming my time. So Bill, appreciate this, this sheet, very helpful. So on the OEM manager, if we were to approve that, would that take the number of officers down from 43 to 42, and then we'd have to backfill that officer position?
So our full complement of officers is 45. What this recommendation is to move that to 46. It would be a uniformed officer that would fill that role.
Okay.
Can I follow, sorry, can I just follow up on that point then?
Sure.
So, but you've accounted for that?
Yes.
That's why the OEM is extras?
Yes.
Because
So
we know who we would move into it, but you would hire behind.
Yeah,
and
it would.
That's already shown in the
presumably,
current
yes,
budget.
someone would be moved into that, and then the trickle effect is we'd end up hiring a new officer. And the budget as presented the baseline numbers includes the full complement of 45 officers. So this would be in addition to that.
Right. Thank you. But I mean, just so everybody knows, we'd be going from 45 officers to 46 officers.
That is correct.
Good, thank you. On the sustainability grant coordinator, I would like to, my personal opinion, I'd like to see what that is over a year period using a retainer, just so we have, I mean, I can't put a ballpark number on what we would be paying out, and I don't know if it's a $120,000 position. So, if that's something that we are going to look forward for the 2023 budget, it would be nice to have some numbers behind that. What did we use in 2022?
Jake, I'm sorry, there's a little distraction on the other side, so I'd like to follow that a little more closely, thanks.
So if we want somebody to be proactively looking at grant opportunities, can we put somebody on retainer and pay them on a monthly basis or a set number of hours and see how that measures up to our expectations and what we are looking for?
As kind of a trial period?
Well, it's a consultancy.
I'm
but
saying consultant instead of staff.
But you have somebody on retainer, and that way we can measure, are we better suited to have somebody on staff, or can we get by and meet our needs by having this consultant on retainer? Or how many hours do we actually think they need to do their job?
Yeah, I mean, if we were separating the grant piece from the sustainability piece, yeah, I think hiring a consultant on retainer to just focus on grants, we could look into that. In any event, it'd have to be funded. It's not something that we're currently paying for now. But, I mean, we'd still need to figure out then what to do with the sustainability piece.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is something that Commissioner Booker raised, which is it's 65,000 next year, but it's year after year. We continue to have a bloated government, and no one's really seeing the year after year increases. On the comp plan, so, I like my colleagues, I think I support this funding, this line item. What does that do for the grant we partnered with Villanova on for the Wayne Business District? How do they coincide?
Yeah, they're two different aspects. I mean, there's some relationship between the two of them. The grant that's being applied for by Villanova on our behalf is specific to just the business district. So the result of that will have an impact, or should be incorporated into ultimately what we're talking about in those areas with the comp plan. So that may just add or advance that conversation a little bit.
But would we be paying for that information twice?
No. Well, I wouldn't advocate for that. If we have the updated planning information that comes out of the grant, we would just use that. But those are just some very isolated areas of the township. It's certainly not comprehensive.
Sure, but
the one with Villanova I'm referring to.
Sure, but those are big areas of the township where, obviously we're going to focus the comprehensive plan on.
Sure, yeah, I mean, they're part of it.
So realistically, that 100,000 number would come in less.
Well, a couple things. So the 100,000 number is a year one number. The full estimate, if you'll recall, was closer to 200,000, but it's over multiple years. And yeah, if there are savings to be realized because of the planning that goes into, and first of all, the application has to be submitted and we have to be rewarded or awarded the grant. If that all happens, then yeah, the outcome of that should soften some of the costs. I don't know if it'll be dollar for dollar, honestly, because a bulk of what the estimate is for the comp plan includes the public meetings and the dialogue and the those types of things, which they're going to occur whether we, regardless of the outcome of the planning grant, the business district planning grant.
Okay, do we have a timeline on the partnership grant with Villanova?
No, Commissioner, we're still waiting on approval or to hear on whether our application is successful or not. We don't have an answer yet.
But we don't know when that answer will come?
I don't have an answer for that. I can look into it and see if we can report back to you with a more definitive timeline on when we will hear. So I'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. On the Park Impact Fee Fund, Tammy, where do you think, in your opinion, where do you think Odorrego Park ranks on using some of those funds?
Well, I definitely think Odorrego Park ranks high overall in improvements needed. But by the same token, I think by the time we get through a community process to evaluate the needs and the wants, I think we have to see where we land there, because I know we've heard a gamut from people in terms of what they would like to see. We've heard people say they'd like to see just a, sort of an in-kind replacement of the comfort station, but then I've heard from a lot of other people that they would like to see some type of a covered pavilion space that can be used for community groups, and it can be used for the different events that go on over in and around the neighborhoods and in the park. So I think, looking at those two different scenarios right there could be a radically different cost. And then I've heard from folks, who would like to see the playground be replaced. I've heard from others that they'd like to see other recreational amenities. So I think we have to go through a community process, which I think is what the community and the neighbors have been looking for, something similar to what we did at Clemacrone, in order to figure out how those funds could be utilized. But I certainly would see in the scenario of Odorrego, all of those funds being used, and then some.
Well, I've had probably close to a dozen meetings with large groups of neighbors over the last 6 weeks. So, those conversations are ongoing now. And if it's a plan you're looking for, that can be wrapped up in first quarter of 2022. They're willing to meet as many times as possible to start moving this along, because 2023, 2024 to start the planning process is just way too long for that neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't think we wanted to start that long, that far from now. I know in having discussions with the Parks and Recreation Board, they've been eager to move those along this year.
Okay, well, if you guys are willing to move in 2022, I will have as many town hall meetings as necessary to make sure you have the information you need.
Yeah, if I could, if there's nothing to stop us from moving forward with the planning piece of it, as long as we understand that depending on where the project comes out at, there may or may not be funding there.
Well, to Sean's point, there's, again, I hope the effort is successful, but there's $1.6 million that has been sitting for the Willows that, again, if we can get a project going now, could we draw from that fund, and then when the Willows Park Preserve meets their goals, we put it back?
So in terms of the timing and the funding, the answer to that is yes. As long as, at the end of the day, if the contract that we have in place with the Willows Park Preserve that has the township meeting our requirements, how it gets funded is ultimately up to the board.
Yep.
So if it happens later down the road or sooner, that's ultimately going to be up to the board and the timing of the projects. I do know that the water line project is coming down the line here in the next couple of months. The rest of the improvements just they're the public improvements. So they're the ones that, not just benefit the mansion itself, but the park.
Right.
So just a quick question about what we're ultimately going to be voting on. So I'm hearing you speak to a very specific project that would be capital spending. Are we voting on projects when we pass this budget?
No,
because I've never seen a list of kind of what's out there and what should be prioritized, and I did not think that was part of passing the full budget.
Yeah, so when it comes to specific projects, no, I am, specific capital projects, other than those that have been included in prior bond issues, those are moving forward as adopted by the board. Any additional or new projects that require funding to come out of this budget, right now we're just talking about amounts. So what what I was recommending for tonight, or as part of the budget, is that the board appropriate the cash balance in the park impact fee fund to be spent in 2022 on some project to be identified or projects to be identified. I had recommended earlier that the Parks Board perhaps weigh in and provide recommendations to the Board of Commissioners early in 2022. But there's, so no specific projects and no specific timeline, to be perfectly honest, because the money's sitting in the account. If it takes us 8 months to figure out what projects to spend it on, then the money will be there. It can go at the board's pace as you decide you want to go.
And is this a fund that we're not otherwise touching? Is this a new thing that you're asking us to move forward to be able to start spending it? It's because we've not been spending anything?
Yeah, but honestly, because there hasn't been a lot of money in that fund, it's just been in the last 1.5 to 2 years that there's been a couple large deposits to now there's a meaningful amount in there that we can get some stuff done with.
If I may?
Well,
Are you ready?
Still
Sorry, go ahead,
going.
sorry.
Thrown off track there for a little bit. So on the Radnor Fire Company, with this $54,000, Rich, I was trying to follow your rationale on this. I mean, if we're going to fully fund it in 4 years, I'm not sure why we're putting money aside for the next 3 years. If we're going to spend that $54,000 if we're going to spend $150 over the next 3 years and put it into a separate fund to grow interest, I would rather just use that $150,000 and get more roads resurfaced or put it into projects that are ready to go now. If they're coming in 4 years for a $200,000 request, putting money aside really doesn't soften the blow. It softens it for 1 year, but every year after that, it's going to be a $200,000 request.
Well, the theory would be that it softens it because it ramps up to 200,000 over 4 years,
For
and then
1
it's
year.
already built into the budget, so you don't even need to add anything because it's already been in the budget.
Well, but again, if that's the rationale behind it, just give me an extra $54,000 a year to put it into projects that can benefit the community now.
Well, where I finally came down on that was let's defer that till next year and start that ramp up 1 year later.
Okay. And then, we've had this conversation every year on the community organizations. Every year I hear, let's fund them this year. It's too hard to give them no notice. We'll work on it for future years. And by my accounts, over my 4 years, Surrey Services, which does not reside in Radnor Township, has received $170,000, which I think could do a lot of benefit to residents and projects here. I'd also like to see, as I said last time, I put the library, the senior center, and the fire companies in a separate category, but at some point, we've got to reduce the amount we give to the other organizations. Otherwise, anybody who helps out a Radnor resident is going to come before this board and request funding, and I'd be doing that if I was running a 501c3. So, I mean, the other ones, we have to, at some point, reduce that down to minimal, if not zero.
I agree with you and Sean about Surrey Services. That should come out of the budget.
My turn? Okay. Bill, when was the last time we raised the millage rate?
The last millage increase occurred in 2019, right, or 2020? My years are off with the pandemic. So in 2021, there was no tax increase. So in 2020 and in 2019, 1 year was for a increase for OPEB, and the other was to recognize some of the increases in prior years to the fire company.
And prior to 2019?
The last increase prior to that was in 2016 that was specific to the millage, or specific to the 2016 park debt that was issued. But prior to that, for operational, the millage has been the same going back to 2012.
So 10 years, just about. Okay. So this $20 per household, that's the median, is that right? Not the average, but the median?
I don't think that was the number.
I'm sorry?
I don't think that was the number.
Oh, maybe I
Somebody up
misheard.
here said it, but Bill,
Yeah,
wasn't
so
that
the
higher?
point, the .08 mils to the median taxpayer in Radnor would equate to about $20 for the year. That's,
Per person or per household?
well, per household.
Per household.
Yeah.
And so that would raise how much?
$500,000 in revenue for the township.
So that, what's the highest increase? If the median's 20, does it go up to 100 and some people are paying nothing, basically? Or is there a lot of zeros, a lot of $5, a lot of?
Yeah, I don't have the specific numbers memorized. I just,
Just your
in statistics,
impression, recollection.
the average is closer to 350,000, the average assessment. The median is quite a bit less than that, which tells us statistically that most of the households are below the average, so it skews the bell curve, to the lower end. But there are extremes on both ends. There's some that are low and some that are very, very, very high. So, that's why we use the median. I mean, it captures most of the households.
Okay. If we don't raise the millage, how will our bond rating be affected?
Well, yeah, there's, well, okay, so first of all, I can't predict exactly how Moody's will react to that. So I'll qualify anything that I say next based
As your
on-
professional opinion? That's good. Go ahead.
Not trying to predict what might actually happen. I will say that we just met with Moody's 2 weeks ago as part of the refunding that's on the agenda later tonight. They affirmed the AA1 rating, which is a very, very strong rating. It's one below the AAA. Radnor's been there for as long as I can remember. The one thing that Moody's has made it clear in their reports is that fund balance for a community our size is critical, and it's something that they look at heavily when deciding what the rating is. So our strong fund balance policy and adherence to it over the years has really helped us. So I would imagine that if we fall short of that without any kind of plan or discussion towards reestablishing that or restoring that, would not work favorably. And Bob, correct me if I'm misquoting what you summarized for me, but I think the Moody's, some of the commentary during the discussion was that, for any kind of expectation of an upgrade in credit rating, the fund balance, 25% is really good, but it would require something closer to 50%, so double, in order for Moody's to react positively towards an increase in rating. So that's hopefully a little flavor on how they feel about the fund balance. It is something that they view as pretty critical.
Let me just ask you this straight out without having to go through like a cross-examination thing here. This is what I'm thinking, is that if we don't raise the millage, it'll affect our bond rating or what we'll be paying back. That if and that will end up costing us more, and everybody in the township more, than if we just raise the millage this 0.08.
So, yeah, I mean, that is definitely one element, but that would only, so if in the future our credit rating is adjusted downward, that would only impact future borrowings.
Right.
All of the borrowings that we have, including the one that we're considering refunding now, would be set.
They're chiseled in
Those are
stone.
fixed.
Okay.
And I'll steal some of Michael's thunder, and I've heard him give this speech a few times over the years, is that the credit rating is a critical element, but it is one of many elements that go into the ultimate pricing. So there's no hard and fast guarantee that if your rating is this, your interest will be that. But the general rule is, if your rating is lower, your interest rates are higher.
On a given day.
Yeah, by how much on any given day,
Right.
yes.
And so if we don't raise the millage, we can't have any of these things that are on the scorecard, right?
Well, what I'm
Or most of
recommending
them.
that is that if we're not going to increase the millage to fund these elements or anything that's new, then we shouldn't add them. And the ones that I'm recommending that we could still move forward with are ones that aren't going to negatively impact the bottom line.
Well, let me just, clearly I'm thinking we should raise the millage. I know that's unpopular, but I'm not running again. I'm kidding. But I think we have bills to pay, and talking about being a bloated township is, are we down 40 people than we were not that 10 years ago? We're down a significant percentage of employees than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, from
So
2005 to
we're
today,
lean and
we're down
mean, and I don't want us to see us getting even meaner. So with regards to the sustainability grant writer person, I think the reason we would want them for us is that we want to be the person's number one priority, not, we're 5 things to do today, and Radnor, we'll get to you. They have to, that person's focus has to be us, and only us. So I think it's important that they be here as an employee. In addition, we have to meet those other requirements that we've with regard to the green plan or whatever it is it's called, with regard to that. In addition, I don't think you can ignore that, we see every day supply chain cost increases, which we're going to have to pay. We see it in plans, how much more things cost. And I just don't want us to get cut short or caught short, which then affects our bond rating and going on and on. It's sort of that, penny wise, pound foolish sort of thing. That's basically, and with regards to, let me ask you about Surrey Services. So they're not in Radnor, but they provide services to Radnor. Isn't that correct? And Bryn Mawr Fire Company's not in Radnor, but they provide services to Radnor. I know they're in Lower Township. I'll just take judicial notice. They're in Lower Township, but they provide services. So the fact that Surrey Services was which, granted their offices were in Wayne or in Radnor Township, and now they're not, is not a no-go then for me. If they provide a needed service to our retired people, to our older citizens, then I think that's really an important thing. And the fact that they moved into Tredyffrin, okay, I don't like it, but it doesn't negate all the good they do and how they help people in our township. That's about it. I, for one, am thinking that we need more revenue into the township.
So I guess I'm last, and I will try not to repeat what many have already said, because there are things I agree with that many have already said. So I guess for me, a budget's always an opportunity. Budget time is always an opportunity to have a little bit of vision. And, Bill just stated, so since 2012, we've only raised taxes 3 times. One time was to have some vision around our parks and our recreation, as well as the library. I think that was the bond in 2015, 2016. Then in 2019, we had the vision or needed to make sure that we were meeting our OPEB obligations, so we raised the taxes then. And then in, that was 2018 and 2019, we raised taxes to specifically fund the fire company. And I believe that's also vision and investment in our township and our residents and the safety and welfare of everyone involved. So just, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that year in 2019, when we raised the funds, that we needed to raise the funds for the fire department, that was a 6% tax increase to raise $100,000. Am I remembering correctly?
I'd have to double check the math. And while you were going through the summary, I did pull it up. This was in the township manager's recommended budget. This is the executive summary that includes the history of the millage. So in 2019 was actually the year we increased it for the OPEB plan. 2020 was for the fire company. So in 19, Bob's the math guy now, so. 6%, yes, just over 6% that year.
Yeah, okay. So, and that was just to get the $100,000 for the fire company when they needed it. which I think is a need that is going to continue to move forward. And I understand the grant, the idea that they could go for more grants, but grants are always iffy. You could get them, you could not. So, I would be in favor of the, of putting the money in escrow and ramping that up, because if we need to raise, I think that grant that they have right now is $250,000. Like, if we had to, in one fell swoop, raise the money for that, and Rich, I'm going to liken this to the Peasers fund, which you may have had a hand in for the school district to pay off the, that ramping up, the big bumps in the funding that was needed for the teacher pensions. The school district planned and they started putting money away, and they put money away so that to smooth that out, so that it wouldn't be a huge impact on the residents when there was a 20% increase, I think, one year in the Peasers, the Peasers contribution. So I understand that concept, and I like it. I think it's a responsible way to not impact residents all at once with a huge amount of money. Because like I said, it was a 6% increase, I think, to raise $100,000. So imagine what it would be to fund $250,000. Or say, we just don't answer calls as quickly as needed and whatnot. So for me, that I'm interested in that. Maybe it's not as much. Maybe we spread it out a little more. But I think that's I like that concept. When I talk about vision, there are things on here for me that stand out. Definitely the sustainability and grant coordinator. I work in nonprofit too. You really can't put a value on someone who's getting paid $65,000 a year but can bring in a $200,000 grant or even more. And those things are out there. DEP has them. There's RACP grants. There's state funding, federal funding. It is out there. You just need people who have the time to seek it out and then match the right projects and put together the grant proposals. So I think that Radnor leaves a lot of money on the table when it comes to that. And having somebody, Melissa does a fantastic job, but it is like a tiny, small part of a job that she does already. So I would be interested in that, and I think that around sustainability, there are a lot of grants that we could tap into and things that we could use to enhance the township. I think Sarah's mentioned it, the electric charging stations and things like that. There are grants out there for that kind of infrastructure and investment. So I think to have that, to me, that's vision. I support our police. The OEM manager position, I might want to reconsider that in 2023. I know it was an invaluable, but I might want to look at that in 2023. Certainly the officers, I know that is definitely something that is needed, but that's definitely a high-ticket item. So we would need to consider that. And the fire inspector, I wonder, if we moved that, as Commissioner Mulrooney suggested, so aren't there fees associated with that? Could that not be offset in some way with the fees?
Yes, so the answer is yes. What the proposal is that we would take a year or two to get the program up and running, then introduce a fee that would cover that cost going forward. However, that's how health works now. There's when the folks renew their health licenses, they're paying a fee that cover the cost of that position. So really looking at those two as a one-to-one change. Okay. But to Commissioner Mulrooney's point, we can reallocate that position in any direction, to be honest, as the board sees fit. We did talk about this internally, so I just I want to make sure that the board's aware and anyone from the public, like what tipped the scales and why the recommendation ultimately went the way of the fire inspector is just our obligation under the code that gave it a little bit more weight for a more immediate response, understanding that the OEM position, as important as it is a new position and something in addition to or outside of what our current daily operation is. So since we were talking about it, I wanted to throw that in there. And just because I got to work with Kevin and Chris both, that they know that there's not playing favorites. There was actually some rationale that went into that.
Well, Kevin's presentation in the last meeting showed how good he was already doing it, finding all of these violations. So, when you do your job that well.
I have to say, I think it's ironic if we don't have a fire inspector and not give money to the fire department. I gotta tell you, one's gonna cause a great use of the other. So, I think we need both. Safety, kind of safety first.
Why can't the fire department do that? We give them enough money. Kevin?
We discussed that at the last meeting. They don't have the credentials from the building side of standpoint. They can obviously go in and make observations, but from the building code standpoint, most of the fire officials and the firefighters don't have that level of certification.
Would it help if we train them to do that, or would that be
It's
more?
a very specialized, intensive program to get your building
so then
certifications.
if they leave, then we're,
There are some that have it, but not nearly enough as to what we would need to utilize for the program.
So I just have, two more quick points. I agree with all those. I believe that the comprehensive plan update, it long past due. What we put forth with the grant, the DCED grant through Villanova, where the Villanova helped us with, that we're hoping to hear from. And I tried to find the when they're supposed to let us know. Could not find that online. But it's always a toss-up if we're going to get that. And I believe that, the comprehensive plan is certainly far more broad and is something that will, I think, advise us when it comes to our zoning and things like that. So I think that's a worthy investment, and I absolutely agree with that. And then for me, the other thing that I think is important is the tree canopy program. We have, I think, a crisis when it comes to the management of our trees in the township. Certainly, even if we just look at what we are responsible for as a township, it's something that we have not. I mean, we heard back in 2018, it's something that we hadn't addressed for, more than 20 years. Well, now we haven't addressed it now for another 4 years or however long. It's only going to get worse, and I think something that ends up costing us much more in the long run as we are dealing with, episodic response to, the issues that we have with the trees, as things are not, as we haven't allocated the resources to it. So for me, that is also, I guess, a visionary allocation to funding, or that is worthy of being funded, and something that I think that we as a board should consider and not continue to put off. Now, I know it's got here assigned program development to Shade Tree. I definitely would like to see Shade Tree involved in that process. But I feel like it's long past for us to acknowledge and work on the issues that we face when it comes to the tree canopy here. And we've had some fantastic people in our township do a lot of work around that, yet we don't really do anything with it because we have not allocated, I think, properly for staffing as well as funding for the job to get done. So if we start small and build it up, it's not something that's it's a over 20-year problem that's not going to be fixed in a year, but, start small, figure out what the problem is, work with Ricky and his team to get that going and ramp it up over the next couple of years, or start to make some decisions around what we do. Turn the trees back to the residents. What are we going to do with these things? But I feel like we need to allocate some dollars to it to start to solve the problem. So that's where I stand.
Okay, staff comment.
I just have one more question. Can I just ask one more question about the fund balance? Because I agree with Kathy. I think that's important as well. So we have so many important things on here, right? Could we start smaller than the 300,000 and ramp that up, or is that like, what we need to do in order to start?
Yeah, we could start at whatever amount we want. The 300,000 honestly was kind of the residual of the increased revenue over the additional expenses added from the other items that would be added to the budget. So yeah, that amount can be whatever it needs to be. As we talked about earlier, the shortfall in fund balance to the policy is significant enough that, you know, every bit helps, but it's going to take time no matter what.
Okay, staff comment? Public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote on ordinance 2021-16, introduction of the final 2022 comprehensive budget by setting the township real estate tax millage rate and adopting appropriations for 22 without any amendments. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. I'm going to move to amend the proposed ordinance in order to reflect no increase in the millage rate. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Amendment passes. Bill, do you feel like you have enough, having heard us talk, to prepare the budget that you will need?
Well,
You can come up and hit me if you want it. It's
no. I just, for some levity, I'm just happy that I could get a unanimous vote on the budget for the first time since I've been in the township. So that's,
Well,
that's a first.
Which,
I appreciate
which
that.
one, the,
The negative, the nay.
yeah, okay, because it
that's-
wasn't the positive one.
Yeah. So there's a feather in the cap. The only, I think I have enough, maybe some clarity on the final amounts for the organizations, because there were some amounts mentioned individually, some significant reductions in some areas. You know, as things stand, you know, when we're looking at the table, the number that would change without increased millage as recommended would just be the Radnor Fire Company. Well, actually, two numbers. Radnor Fire Company would go to $995,805. So that would just be $20,000 higher than their 2021 amount, again, for capital. And then the Wayne Arts Center, just some clarity on that amount. If we're not interested in forgiving the loan, then what would be the amount the board would want to fund them going forward?
So I'm going to recommend, I'm going to start with the highest number, go down to the lowest number, and see if I can get any takers from the board for those two.
That would be, yeah, by motion?
I'm
Or
just
just-
going to ask for a show of hands.
Jeff, just before you, I just have one quick question. So if we do have to raise the millage, are we going to have to re-advertise this or not? Because that's a pretty significant thing, correct?
You may have to, if that's what you
I
want to
just
do.
want to know, so if we're going to put that in stone,
What's going to get advertised is no millage increase. That'll come
okay,
back
but
to
if
you.
we decide down the
For
road that we want to
11/20,
keep
right.
some things and we'll have to re-advertise and wait another 2 weeks, is it? Okay.
Your next meeting, yes.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with just show of hands for Radnor Fire Company at $1,050,377. Okay, then the next would be Radnor Fire Company, $995,805.
That's with the additional 20, which you were recommending to raise, so that's for them for capital, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And could I see the show of hands again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that we have a consensus at $995,805. And then the next you asked for was the Wayne Arts Center? Bill?
That is correct.
Okay, so starting at, heck, let's shoot for the moon. Tonight, do we want to forgive their existing debt and then not pay them anything other than the forgiveness. That would be an $800,000 forgiveness. Seeing no takers,
And that would be, we would not pay them ever again.
ever again, they'd be out of it.
Hold on, Commissioner Abel, this board will say that we'll never pay them again. If they run into trouble 2 years from now, so let's use our
understand.
words carefully, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying everybody in this room.
So I'm not seeing any takers. $150,000 is the request for this year. My recollection, somebody correct me on this, did they not say that the? Is that right?
I see
The
130
total-
as the delta.
Forgive me, the total was 150, which was operations of 50,000 and a capital contribution of 100,000.
Right. My recollection was that they said that the roof would hold for an additional year, that they could wait until next year for that.
Well, I'm not going to speak for the Art Center, but I'm going to speak for someone who has leaky roofs, and yes, they do last. You just find more plugs, yeah.
They make a lot of bowls there. Okay, so 150. Okay, 20,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that we have a deal at 20,000. Does that answer your questions, Bill?
What about Surrey? Can we have a vote on that?
We can do that. Surrey is looking for $35,000. Do we have any takers at 35? All right.
Those were the two things, it's 35 or 0.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would propose cutting them down to 20.
I'd vote for 10.
I'd take 10.
I'll do 10. You'll have my vote at 10, and then next year it's going to be 0.
Okay. All in favor of 10? I think that's a number.
Okay, then the last one I had a question mark by was with respect to reallocating the vacant health position to either the fire inspector program or the OEM.
Let's go fire inspector first. OEM?
No, I want the first one.
You want the first?
Wait. So what were the choices again? What were the choices? Office of Executive Management, but what was the first choice?
Fire inspector. Let's do this again. Fire inspector, all in favor?
Which item are we looking at? I'm sorry.
So at the moment, the health inspector position, the funds for that is being reallocated, and it is recommended that that would go to a fire inspector. Moira,
You're
is
looking
that-
at line 1 and 3 at the top. It would either be the police OEM manager position or community development fire inspector. We would be reallocating the health inspector salary to
Bless you.
one of those two positions.
Right, and the staff recommendation is the fire inspector.
Okay, calling the vote on that one again, at least to show of support. Everyone who prefers the fire inspector. Thank you. Everyone who would prefer the fire inspector, speak up now. 1, 2, 3. Everybody who prefers, I have 4. So that's a wrap. Fire inspector it is.
So what about the other positions? Are they off the table? Everything else is off the table.
There's at least $110,000 that we didn't account for in the budget, I think.
So if I could, while
Sounds like Odorizio Park, Jack.
So,
I think it's been a good process.
yeah, the recommendation is, the recommendation from my perspective is that if we don't have the millage to fund the positions perpetually, going forward, the
Perpetuity?
brain is starting to shut off, then we shouldn't add them. Could the board vote right now to incorporate any one of these items into the budget? Yes, you could. So just because there's a red X under the without millage increase, that's just my recommendation without funding. But that doesn't mean the board can't still say go. As I talked about at the outset, with specific to the tree canopy program, I think that's one that, unless the board allocates funding, there would be no dollars, but it is something that could definitely still get started in the planning aspect. But if the board wanted to add money to that, you certainly could. And the same would be for the Sustainability Grant Coordinator, OEM, any one of them. Fund balance, although that's a little trickier because you got to have the revenue to allocate the fund balance. Otherwise, anything we don't spend just stays in fund balance.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if that was confusing, but that's kind of how the recommendation was set up.
Well, could we go through and say, like, what things we know so stick with what we've got and what we voted on, and Bill, you've got your direction around that. But could we also look at, say what we definitely don't think we want right now? So I guess that's only a couple things, but what we definitely don't want, and then see maybe what we would talk about a millage increase to fund if it was, the Sustainability Grant Coordinator. Or, because it's not all or nothing, is it? It's not, we need to have a 0.08 mil increase to fund one program or one thing, correct? Is it all or nothing? Like all the green check marks or none of the green check marks?
No, it's not. It can be, it can be any variation of anything in between that you want. Again, I was trying to align what I had recommended at the last meeting to the decisions in front of the board tonight. So, yeah, the board could decide it wants to raise the millage by 0.01, and I'm making up the numbers now, to fund just the tree canopy, or just the engineering sustainability grant coordinator, or just the OEM. So we could get to that level. But, I mean, there was already a vote taken to hold the millage at the same rate. So any decision we make without changing that vote is it would be cash coming out of the fund balance, presumably.
Is the tree canopy, it makes perfect sense to me to say you're not going to hire someone if we're using money that's a one-time influx of cash. We need to have the revenue stream, not just the cash. Is the tree canopy something that we would need to invest year over year, or do you just need the $81,000 from somewhere?
Well, honestly, I think ultimately, what's going to come out of the shade tree might be very different than what was recommended here. Actually, I would expect that. And it could be much higher than 80,000, depending on what the ultimate recommendation is. So what I was proposing here was some amount, a one-time amount for to do the study, the canopy study, and then towards the end of the year, some additional dollars, assuming that we were to hire someone in Public Works specific to that program. So that's what made up the 81,000. If what comes out of Shade Tree is very different, maybe they say, look, you don't need the study, there's enough data out there and other sources that accomplishes that goal, then we're set on the data, then, whatever the amount is for the resource, I guess what I'm hitting the reset button on is I'm not sure what they're going to recommend. They might think one is not enough. They might say one is enough, in which case 81,000 would cover, almost a full year's worth of cost there. So,
well, we have, from my math, between the reduction in proposed cash to the community groups and the incoming settlement, we have more than the 81,000 for a one-time expense. Could we allocate that to that in particular?
Yes. Just as you talked about earlier, it'll show back up next year for ongoing funding.
But, on the tree canopy, is it tree canopy study or program? How is that different from what Matt and Jane Golis did 2 years ago?
I can answer that, Commissioner. So in speaking with Matt Golis, there's a couple of things. First, it was not township-wide. It was very comprehensive, but it wasn't a look at the entire canopy throughout the township. And as Matt had said, at this point, it is dated because it is 2 years old. So as the manager said, in some fashion, through some source, various sources, to determine what is the tree canopy. We have an idea. It was in one of the studies, but that is a different item.
So then are we saying we need to do a tree canopy study every 2 years?
I'm also saying that what Matt did was fantastic, but he did not cover the entire canopy throughout the township, right? He was more relegated to street trees.
Right, but you said the information is dated, and that was 2 years ago.
And that's what Matt had told me at one of the last shade tree meetings.
So to Jack's point, is this a one-time expense, or are we going to need to do a study every 2 years because the data gets dated?
Well, don't forget, a tree canopy study on a high level is different than what Matt did, which was tree by tree, DBH, species, and condition. So I think they're two different things.
Well, no, the answer to that is the resource that we would hire, combined with the GIS efforts that we're moving forward with, that it would be kept up to date all the time. So as trees are either removed or planted, the inventory would be adjusted real time, and as trees are maintained, that would all be done real time, and that's part of what the responsibilities of the resource would be to do. So that we wouldn't be in a position where it'd have to be refreshed every couple of years. It would be something that we could have available and reliable on an ongoing basis. That's the ideal state.
Right. Let me, Commissioner Larkin, you done? Great. So, Commissioner Larkin, you didn't bring up the library, cutting the library, is that correct or not? Okay. So I would be in favor of cutting the library $100,000. So I probably won't get any takers on it, but maybe cutting them in half is high, and then I have a comment afterwards, so.
So is there any other takers?
Okay. My concern is that we can make some of these cuts and we have new money, newly found money, and we're just going to say, oh, well, we can afford this position or afford that position. COVID has hit us hard. It's hit our businesses hard. It's hurt our mercantile tax, which we'll talk about. We have issues with sewer and stormwater, and we're trying to spend this money on new, really on legacies, which is new position after new position after new position. I get the sustainability, where if they can pay for themselves, that's great. I think that works out great. That's fine. But if we have 81,000, and I think that's the number now, in a surplus, that should go either to pay our debt, pay our OPEB, do something, but not just say, how quickly can we spend it? We have too many internal needs, and it may be the Willows or Odoricio, or the list goes on and on and on. But you can't say that we've done a job to save money and now we're going to spend it. These pet projects, I think that we need to do the responsible thing, find the money, or find find where that money needs to go and use that money there. I am happy to put it in our parks or anything like there, but I just don't think that we should just say, hey, well, we can afford it now because we cut it. The question is, if we're saying that, then did we really need it in the first place? I guess that's kind of my point. So that's what I got. I think we need to do the responsible thing, and we need to take this excess money and pay off our debt, or look at our the project list that goes on and on and on, that's backlogged for years, and fix some of these things. That's a responsible thing to do.
Okay, I'm going to ask for the board's pleasure on spending the money on the one-time tree canopy project. Do we have support for that?
So I just want to be clear, that 81,250 was for that's for the study, or is that for staff moving forward?
It was both. I think we had estimated somewhere around 50, well, not somewhere, we had estimated 50 for the study and then 21,250 for the resource, with an assumption that that person would be hired in the last quarter of 2022.
Oh, so there is an ongoing expense there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably not going to work then.
So, all right. I mean, I know this is something that people really feel is important, but I guess, sending that back, we can ask Shade Tree to put together a plan for us. I know there's been some concern raised about, spending that kind of money on the canopy, and I know we feel like we need that, but, are there other options? So we give it to them and take some time on how we can move that forward. But I would be interested in seeing, what would it look like if we were going to hire the sustainability grant coordinator? I mean, what would that look like? I think that could pay for itself. And
Can I propose on so for the tree canopy, and this was brought up in public comment at the last meeting, I thought it was a really good idea, giving it to Shade Tree, letting them weigh in, and that, at the end of the day, I think that's going to be a better recommendation to the board, and better for you guys to make a decision on. That can happen no matter what. That doesn't require any allocation from the board. Just to get that program started, the development started. Then with regard to the sustainability grant coordinator, Commissioner Abel had suggested or thought about a retainer for some period of time to see if that's viable, or if that in some way demonstrates the benefit of having a resource. There might be some other options that we can consider there, that being one of them. So maybe that's something we can go back, without any dedicated funding, but come back to the board with recommendations going forward on that one. Because like anything else, there's opportunities or perhaps something else we can do.
And Bill, just go back to the canopy study. Would we be allowed to use the Shade Tree Fund for the study? Because it's not planting, but it's preserving.
Yeah, where that gets a little tricky is that, the dollars that are donated by Chanticleer are pretty clear that they want trees in the ground. We do get, from time to time, fines paid into that fund for folks that cut trees down outside of the permitting process. So I would say to the extent that there's money generated from fines, yes, that fund is appropriate for that purpose. I just want to be careful with the Chanticleer money.
Right, but
if it's close, I would err on the side of planting versus anything else.
Is it worth having a conversation with Chanticleer, just asking for this 1 year, just to get the study done, if it's a good use of the funds?
We can always ask the question, sure. They've been
because it would help us
very clear.
Well, it would help us put the trees in the right place.
Granted, yes.
I think I'd like to hear Shade Tree weigh in on that. I mean, they've already made plans to spend, spending the funding and on trees and making plans around that. So I'd like to hear them weigh in on that.
But in the meantime, you can ask the question so you can give Shade Tree options.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Moving back to the amended ordinance. I'm going to call again for any final public comment on the amended ordinance. Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of ordinance 2021-16 as amended to reflect no increase in the township millage, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. Motion passes. Moving on to ordinance 2021-17, introduction. Introduction of the 2022 sanitary sewer and stormwater fees. I will so move. Is there a second? Bill or Bob, could you tell us a little about this?
Yeah, I'm going to hand this one off to Mr. Tate.
Thank you, sir. Before you is tonight is the ordinance to set the sewer rate for 2022. The rate proposed is $8.90 per 1,000 gallons. It's an increase of $1.05 over last year's rate. And this is in line with increased cost as passed along by RHM, which is passed along to RHM from Delcora for treatment of the water the sewage downstream. With regards to stormwater, there's no proposed change in any of the rates. Those rates will remain the same in 2022 as 2021.
Is there any commissioner comment or questions? Is there any staff comment? Public comment?
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. I've said this before and been laughed at by Mr. Booker. But for the sewer rate, each household can choose to conserve and keep that cost down.
Hey, Bob, what's the percentage increase in the sewer rate that you're proposing there with that dollar and change?
Commissioner, that increase would be 13.4%. Last time it was raised was in 2020, and that was a 10% increase.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. Fails for lack of a majority, I think.
All right, so at some point in 2022, we're going to have to transfer general fund money to the sewer fund to make up for the loss. There's not enough cash in the fund to pay for the expenses. So we'll have to figure that out as we go forward.
Is there any proposed amendment to ordinance 2021-17? Okay, I'm going to propose an amendment to, Bob, what would be your proposal less a penny?
I'm sorry?
What would be your recommended rate less a penny?
$8.89 per 1,000?
Okay, so I'm moving to $8.89 per 1,000. Is there a second to the amendment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion to amend passes. Is there any additional commissioner comment on the amended motion? Hearing none, is there any public comment on the amended motion? We call the vote on the amended motion.
Can I just ask a question? So, I mean, we really don't have a choice on this. I mean, the rate was raised on us, correct?
Yeah, you can flush the toilet and what's in there goes away or not. It's up to us.
RHM raised the rate,
Correct.
12%, correct? Okay.
I believe you. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
It
That
was
sounds
12%.
right.
Said 13, it was 13 and change, 13%.
13? Okay. Thanks, Rich. Okay.
Right. Not yet, we're not. All in
Sorry.
favor of the amended ordinance, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Amended ordinance passes. Moving to ordinance number 2021-18, introduction of the consolidated fee schedule for the township effective January 1st, 2022. I will so move. Is there a second? Second. Bob, is this you again?
Yes, sir. This, I would ask the board to consider in light of the email I had circulated late afternoon, very minor changes on the attachment to the fee schedule for our outside consultant services. There were about 6 or 7 positions that were had to be adjusted by $5 per hour. So what was enclosed in the budget previously and presented and posted, there is an attachment to the fee schedule, and there are a handful of positions from our outside engineers that moved up $5 an hour. A couple of them went down $5 an hour. So minor adjustments. So based on the email I circulated earlier, I would just ask for the board to consider an amended motion to consider the adjusted fee schedule.
I'm sorry, you said an amended motion. Do you need us to amend now, or?
Amend now to accept the fee schedule as amended per this afternoon's email.
Understood. Okay. Is that in the packet?
No, my apologies, it did not make the packet because the quick review at the last minute, we found just a couple of those engineering positions.
Okay.
And they're up on the board now.
Oh, it's on the board? Okay, perfect. That's good enough for me then. I will move to amend per what's on the board. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes.
I have no idea what we're even voting on. Are we voting on stormwater, sewer, what?
The fee schedule.
The fee schedule, and we just
Can't even
amended
see.
it based on Bob's information that was updated today. So it's, the rates are now as highlighted in the green column.
I just have a question there. So some of the rates go up, some of the rates go down. I get it. And this goes back to the whole budget thing with we shouldn't spend money just because we have it. Are we looking in general that our consultants are going to be charging more? I mean, gas is more, labor's more. We have difficulty hiring people in our township. I know Steve Norsini, hopefully, you're the hardest working man in Radnor as far as I'm concerned. You finally, hopefully, got a, I don't want to say assistant, may not be the right word, but someone to help you out here. And that took about a year to get. Is there going to be an issue with labor moving forward? Because you can just go around any town or city, and there's a labor shortage. So when it comes to more skilled labor, especially when we're looking at $150, $120, $170 an hour, is that something that we need to be concerned about, especially for 2022 and whatnot going forward?
So just generally speaking, the fees that are outlined in the fee schedule are reviewed pretty much on an ongoing basis by each of the departments. We try to be, we try to hit the sweet spot between, covering the appropriate amount of cost and still being competitive with other municipalities in terms of what fees are being charged. And then, of course, that is all part of the overall analysis in terms of real estate taxes and business taxes. So when we set our fees, we're trying to marry the 3 different elements together to generate the right revenue number. So in most cases, those fees remain unchanged for the most part year over year. There's minor tweaks from time to time, or a new fee might come in, say if with the fire inspection program in a year or two. Specific to the rates that are being amended as we go through here tonight in green up on the screen, for the most part, these are outside consultants that are used in the development review process. They're reviewing plans, and those are being paid for by the applicant in most cases. So these are pass-through costs that are ultimately not paid by the taxpayers, but by the applicants of the developments, the development plans themselves.
Okay, but that still doesn't answer my question in the sense of, are we finding that these fees, because we still use Gannett Fleming, I would think that we use them a fair amount when it comes to our projects. I mean, we write some pretty big checks to them. Do you see that we're going to be facing higher rates moving forward? Is it harder to find employees? Is there a general trend that we should be aware of and focused on? That's my the main point.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing a negative impact from these fees to our ability to hire personnel. Ultimately, the driving factors to replacing or filling positions with full-time employees comes down to what compensation we're willing to offer, and compensation and package we're willing to offer. These rates are set by these companies to cover their costs. So I don't see these impacting our ability to keep or hire those positions.
Well, so it's not to cover their costs, it's for them to make a profit. We need to cover our costs. I'm not trying to be argumentative or difficult. I just think that, I'm just looking at a general labor trend, and you're saying that there's not one.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Are you suggesting that we should have in-staff personnel doing these reviews?
I
versus
personally,
outside?
to a certain extent, would love it, number one. But number two, I'm just looking in general that these rates are rising. It's a general trend that everything is rising. It's hard to find people to work. There are help wanted signs all over. So if Gannett Fleming or if Gilmore gets in a pinch and their rates rise, or we have to pay an additional amount because they don't have the manpower, and we have to go to another consultant, I just think that we should look at the labor trend, and it's pretty telling when you just look on Main Street what's going on. That's all I'm saying, is that when we have a little bit of a windfall of money, it shouldn't just be spend, spend, spend. We don't know what's around the corner. Could our mercantile tax fall again? Yes. Could these rates go up? Possibly. Could we lose an employee and then we have to pay 30% more to fill an essential staff? Yes. And I'm looking, if these rates are going up, I think it's a general trend that this board and you guys should just kind of take into consideration. And that's my point, and that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, so the fees as included in the fee schedule from our estimation would accurately generate the revenue needed to operate our various departments. You know, for 2022, obviously, those trends and what happens in 23, 24, though we may have to, adjust here or there and look at our fees differently in some of the areas, but for 2022, the fees, as recommended, should be appropriate.
Okay, last question. Are these locked in for a year?
No. Any one of the fees.
These are floating rates, and they may say, hey, we don't have the manpower to look at this project, and then we would have to go to another firm? I mean, how does that work?
Well, when it comes to the outside consultants, we would go through the RFP process. If they were to come back and change these significantly, the recommendation would be to RFP the service and do a more comprehensive review. Any one of the fees in the fee schedule can be changed by resolution at any point during the year.
Thank you.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Going on to item D. Bond refunding legislation. Sub A, ordinance 2021-12, adoption, authorizing the advanced refunding of the Series 2013B in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $15,500,000. Bob Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the adoption of the ordinance that was introduced at the last meeting for refunding of the 2013 bonds in the aggregate amount not to exceed the $15,500,000. We do have with us here, nothing has changed in the 2 weeks since this was introduced. With us here tonight, Suzanne Mays of Cozen O'Connor, our bond counsel, as well as Michael Wolf with Benning and Scattergood, are two outside professionals who assist tremendously in any of these bond refunding or new financing opportunities that the township endeavors upon. Any particular questions, they'll be happy to ask, but the savings are consistent with the last time we discussed this, and we're looking to move forward with adoption tonight.
Commissioner comment?
Is there any discussion of the, Mike, you worn out? Yeah, well, we're here too. So could you review the savings, also where we are in the interest rates? Talk about the, when these are going to be sold and when we're going to close on this? And is there any new money? Well, this is strictly a refund, current refunding?
No. Good evening. This is an advance refunding, the kind that is no longer allowed to be done using tax-exempt bonds. It's exactly mirroring something you did a year ago. We're doing a taxable advance refunding of the 2013 notes. We're trying to save something like $600,000 over the next 13 years. It's not quite as juicy as the one a year ago, because this was in 13 already a refunding of some 2004 bonds, and every time you do it, you get a little less juice from the squeeze. But we think we're in the range of 5% savings net present value with a 3% target. Taxable rates are attractive and have actually been dropping in the last few days. We are in shape with a new rating and a new POS ready to go out. We're ready to sell bonds and lock rates on Monday. Is there any, did I hit most of your points, or is there something I forgot?
Any issues with the escrow? And you said there's no new money in this, right?
There's no new money. I think we asked, and we actually are right up. Yeah, we asked, and we have unspent proceeds that you're working on, so we're not going to do any new money at this time. Unspent proceeds from prior issues, and we get a new bite of a new apple beginning January 1st for more tax-free bonds. So we'll be ready then.
You said you're going to price Monday?
Monday.
And is PFM working on this at all? Are they doing anything?
They're doing the same thing they've done for the last 3 or 4 issues. They're called your pricing agent, and there was a resolution 2 weeks ago to appoint PFM to their prior
That's
role.
what I thought. I'm surprised I didn't see them here when I see both of you here. Okay, that's all I had.
Did these bonds have, were they callable? Were they 5-year callable, or what?
So the old 2013 bonds
Yeah,
were not bank qualified, and they have a 10-year call.
10-year.
10-year call for non-bank qualified bonds, so they're not callable really using tax-free bonds. They're not callable until 2023. We're going to do it 2 years early by using taxable bonds the way you did, excuse me, at the end of 2020. We have discussed it and decided that even though we might get more money by waiting 2 years, we're not willing to risk the loss
Yeah,
of
the interest
the
rate.
savings.
I thought most municipal bonds have a 5-year call rate.
Most of your bonds have a 5-year call when they're tax-free and under 10 million par amount. We're going to be issuing a little over 12 million of bonds, and they aren't going to be tax-free. The norm is for a 10-year call on those bonds. We're going to try and do a little bit better.
So they're going to be taxable.
These are going to be taxable to the owners.
So so what's the rate taxable versus tax-free?
There's almost no difference on the short end, but as you move out into the longer maturities, 13 years out, there is a slight penalty. We have some bonds that will have coupons in 31 through 34, just around a little over 2%. And if they were tax-free, they would be less.
So we're having a 10-year debt with a 5-year call on some of this, correct? And what's the longest duration?
It's going to be...
No, it's a 5-year call.
No.
So it's a 10-year call.
You typically get a 5-year...
So it's a 30-year bond with a 10-year call?
No, there's only 13 years left.
There's 13 years.
22 through 34.
Okay.
They're not callable, well, they'll be callable somewhere in the 8 to 10-year range.
Okay.
So you'll be able to call in the ones that mature, hopefully, beginning in maybe 29 through 34.
Assuming the interest rates are favorable to do so.
Right.
Okay.
So they're not quite as good as sometimes the bonds you issue, but we're doing everything we can, like we did a year ago, to try and get the savings before the economy recovers to the point where we wish we had done it.
Whatever that means.
Rates are going up.
So the taxable portion, this taxable issue doesn't present any issues for our staff, Bob or Bill? There's no issues that we're concerned about? Is there anything in reporting, or is there any difference to our regular process that you need to think about?
I don't think so, and you did a very successful one of these, as I said, a year ago, maybe getting probably the best savings you've ever gotten. I think it was over $1 million. So nothing different for the staff, and again, because they're taxable. You can talk to Suzanne about it, but there are fewer requirements when they're taxable. It's the tax-free bonds that incur all the oversight from the IRS.
There's fewer.
Are these general obligation bonds?
They're still general obligation bonds, just like all your others. It's a much bigger market, many, many times larger than the tax-exempt market. Lots and lots of buyers looking for high quality.
They're AA1.
AA1.
Moody's.
Yeah, and as I like to say, the strongest widget maker doesn't have the credit capacity of Radnor Township with its general obligation credit.
Are these insured?
No, we don't need insurance AA2,
No,
AA1.
I don't think you do. I think our rating is higher than a lot of these insurance companies.
That's right.
but-
You haven't had bond insurance for years.
Okay. No, I know Laura Marion is AAA rated, which is higher than almost every insurance company.
I didn't hear you.
The heck with that, I said.
Okay.
It's not worth the effort.
Last questions on this? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving to item D sub B, Resolution 2021-131, Reimbursement Resolution authorizing reimbursement of stormwater project expenditures in advance of financing. Mr. Tate.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I apologize. Let me interrupt you for one moment. I will so move. Is there a second? Thank you. Mr. Tate, apologies.
Thank you. I will let Suzanne jump in here and maybe get into some of the technical side of this, but the Township did this several years ago. The resolution is designed to basically start the timeline for, in advance of borrowing. Well, let me back up. This is completely unrelated to the refunding, number one. This is independent. This will be in preparation for when we borrow for our stormwater projects. So the board has previously approved, and we have a slate of projects, and we have up to $15 million that we've been discussing borrowing. However, we are beginning to incur some of the preliminary expenses on those projects as they start to move along in the process. The reimbursement resolution gives the township the cover, or so to speak, to reimburse ourselves when we go out for financing or for bonds for the, for the cost of these projects. We're reimbursing ourselves for the cost that we incur in advance of financing.
So just so I understand, I've got a $1,000 project. I need to go to the bank in order to get the $1,000 because I don't have it in my back pocket. I've got the 50 cents that it's costing me today, so I'm going to spend the 50 cents out of pocket. When I go and I get the $1,000, the first thing that I do is I pay myself back the 50 cents. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Correct.
Do we have any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Moving on to ordinance number 2021-13, introduction, Radnor Business Privilege and Mercantile Tax Ordinance Amendment to permit rounding to nearest dollar. I will so move. Is there a second?
Second.
I'd be grateful if, as a component of telling us about this, John or Bob or somebody, I know that if our business privilege and mercantile tax ordinances go away, we may not be able to bring them back. My question will be, are we permitted to amend them to affect this? But
I have discussed with Jenny, Ms. Brown in advance. This is not the type of amendment that would jeopardize our ability to maintain our business tax ordinances. Okay. This is more of just a matter of administration and housekeeping, consistent with what the IRS implemented, I think, back in the 90s, and states followed suit. It's just an administrative ease to permit rounding on the tax return and the preparation of the tax returns. And it would be set to go into effect as of 1/1/2022.
Is this always rounding up?
Based on the cents, 51 cents and up, we'd round up, yes.
Why do you want to do this, Bob?
It cuts down on a lot of the processing and clerical errors that we have experienced over the years, both on our side when we receive the tax returns and we're reconciling cash payments against the calculations of the taxpayer, and it also makes it easier for those filing, whether the tax preparer or the company themselves. It's ease of processing on both ends.
I would be okay with it if you round down and not up. People shouldn't have to pay, even if it's a penny more, in taxes. So if you want to change that to, we can round it down and keep everything even, I'm fine with it. But I think the consensus tonight was, when it comes to our property taxes, we pay enough in taxes, and we didn't want to raise the millage rate. So I just think it sends the right message to our businesses, many whom are struggling, that if we're going to do it, we're going to round down. I don't think it's going to have any material effect other than it shows goodwill toward our businesses.
I'm sorry, Sean, I think you were done. Maybe I misunderstand, but this is basically saying each business, you're either going to pay 49 cents more or 49 cents less. Is that right? So it's all just zeros in the cents column.
It's rounding to the nearest dollar based on the fraction, whether it's,
Yeah,
yes,
so in other
49
words-
cents or,
Right, so instead of being $121.52, it's going to be $123, or vice versa, $121. That's it. That's it. So it's just making zeros in all the columns, so it's easier for, in those columns.
we're just rounding off the cents, that's
Right,
all.
that's
We're
it.
not, no, we're not rounding off a dollar, we're just rounding
That's
off the
right.
cents
So,
to the nearest dollar.
And that's just in the final amount that they have to pay.
That's,
right?
that's correct.
So that's it. So, and this just makes it easier for you.
Well, it's easier.
For everybody.
It's more, yes, it's
Yeah.
more ease of administration and processing
So-
across the board.
For 49 cents, we're getting a lot of breathing room. People are getting like, oh, not worried about them making a mistake. And you're not spending time chasing down, oh, was this right, was this wrong? You already know in those 0 columns, that's all correct. Sounds good to me.
I'd like to think that's the end result. There are other
Okay.
townships who do the same, and their forms are designed, and it says, you can't put the cents in. It's only a dollar amount, and it clearly states on there to, round to the nearest dollar.
So I'd like to just make a motion to amend that to, instead of rounding, changing that to rounding down.
Is there a second?
Wait, I just.
Second.
Okay.
I think, Sean, it's both rounding to the nearest dollar is both rounding up and rounding down.
No, rounding, I don't think anyone should have to pay any more in taxes than they owe. And we're asking people to, even though it's not material, it's just businesses are struggling, it sends the wrong message. We ourselves said, here, we didn't want to raise our millage rate because people are struggling, yet we're not, it's just, we're not taking that to the businesses. It's more of an issue on principle, not the principle,
Yeah.
you know the principle.
Can I just-
But, actually, I'm still speaking, thanks. It's more of an issue of principle, and what the message that we want to send out to our businesses that are struggling.
May I ask a question now? So, Bob, if we round down, so.
Motion.
Can I ask a question before I vote on your motion or not? I mean, you're making motions before anyone even gets to finish asking questions on the original motion on the table. So if we round down, does the township loses that money, correct? So can I just ask a question? So if it's 50 cents or 51 cents, and instead of rounding up, we decide to round down to get to the 0, we lose that money, correct?
That would be correct.
Even if it's 99 cents, you lose 99 cents.
Yeah, so, I mean, it may not sound like a lot, but doesn't it start to add up? I don't know, and I'm just saying, if we are rounding down, are we just rounding up if it's over 50 cents?
It says rounding to the nearest dollar. In common rounding, you round up if it's 51 cents, and you round down if it's 49
Right,
cents.
but Sean made a unique request and was moved and seconded.
Yeah, so let's call the vote on Sean's proposal. We would only round down, so 99 cents would become 0, $1.99 would become $1, $2.99 would become $2. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. Amendment fails.
Yeah, so my recommendation on this is going to cost some money to change our form and right? It's going to take some effort. You, Bob, and the staff is going to have to do something, right?
We're already prepped to do it. It's more of just changing a couple of documents and putting the instructions in. There's really no outside cost, additional outside cost. We're going to print the forms as we normally do. We're going to mail them as we normally do. But to change a column to eliminate the cents and to put some instructions, that's as simple as typing a couple of, typing within Word and making those adjustments. So it's not, there is no significant or any material cost that I can even imagine to do this.
Well, I wouldn't do it. It's going to be some confusion to some people, and some people might still mess it up. And they might say, oh, well, Sean, I agree with Sean, we should always round it down. I don't see spending any extra time on this. I think everybody can get it right, even with the cents. It's 3 mils on every dollar of gross receipts attributable to Radnor or allocable. So I wouldn't do it. I don't think it's worth any. I think we already spent too much time on it tonight.
Would you wind up sending a refund if they overpaid by 50 cents? How does that work? I mean, this seems like a waste of administrative, right? I mean, if they overpaid.
It's incumbent upon a taxpayer to properly file and prepare and pay taxes as based on their calculations. So providing a rounding option just would ease some of the calculation for them. So whether it's in their favor by 49 cents or not by 49 cents, it's just going to round it off and make the processing hopefully a little easier for them.
Okay, is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment?
Simple question. If all of us pay taxes to the federal government, why aren't we making it consistent with the federal government, which is if it's 51 cents, it's to the next dollar, and if it's 49 cents, it's down. Let's be consistent. That makes it easier on us, and it makes it easier on the taxpayer.
Okay, calling the vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Moving on to Resolution 2021-129, authorizing the payment of change orders number 4 and 6 through 16 to RoadCon, Inc. for the Radnor Tap Trail project for a total of $160,099.01. I will so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Resolution 2021-130, Radnor Trail Extension Environmental Testing and Evaluation for arsenic in the amount of $55,480. I will so move. Is there a second? Is there any commissioner comment?
Yeah, a question. Why do we need to test for arsenic?
So Commissioner, as part of the trail, we had to do testing. We found arsenic. The purpose of this is to determine the horizontal and vertical limits of the arsenic. Next step will be to determine how the quantities, to what depth and to what width we remove for construction of the trail.
What's arsenic there from?
Where does that come from?
It's,
Somebody have some kind of operation or something, or some kind of?
don't forget, this is an old rail bed, right, from the turn of the century. It's not uncommon to find arsenic in certain areas, so we did find it. This is a next level step to move forward with construction of the trail. We had two options. We could cap it and leave it in place, or remove it. Capping it has a couple of drawbacks. A, you still have it there. B, you have to grade effectively to still cap it, right? So it kind of limits some of your grading. And more importantly, you have to have monitoring in perpetuity. If we remove it, it's a one-time cost. It is out. The area is safe, and we can grade and construct a trail to the proposed grades. I'm
Well,
sorry, and that's what this change order is for, is to determine those limits. And there will be one more proposal from Campbell Thomas. Once these limits are determined, they will provide a revised proposal on how we will grade and redo this trail with this material removed.
What about the removal and disposal?
That will be part of the contract. If it so pleases this board in the future to construct this trail, that will all be part of that contract.
Well, how much is it going to be?
That we don't know. So part of this is to determine those vertical and horizontal limits, those actual cubic yardage quantities, and that will give us an idea of cost.
Why don't you figure on encapsulating it and building the trail over it? Obviously, it's not going to hurt anybody.
Well, again, so the drawbacks to that are it can limit your grading because you have to keep a certain amount of soil over to cap it, but also you have to monitor that in perpetuity for as long as we're all here and everybody else is here. We have to monitor that. So
what's your best estimate of what more it's going to cost?
Commissioner, until we do, if it pleases the board to do this work, until we get those quantities, I have no idea. I couldn't even give you a magnitude.
But we don't have any choice. We have to delineate the arsenic, correct? So, I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't please this member of the board, I don't think there's a choice in this. Is there a choice in delineating the extent of the arsenic?
Either way, we're going to have to delineate if it was determined to cap it. But through our meetings internally with our consultants with PennDOT, it was decided this would be the long-term best way to move forward.
What if we just say, leave it there and we're not going to worry about it? What would happen then?
That we can't do
Why not?
because it's arsenic.
But you just said if it, so that's what my question was. Is this a Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection regulation? Has there been a letter? Is there something, are we just following regular protocols and we're going to report this? You know, what if we just say we're not going to bother with it?
So as part of doing the design, we have met with all the agencies, and these are the options provided. You can encapsulate it, cap it, leave it in place, or remove it. And again, so if you encapsulate it, you have those options. If we remove it, the site will be clear, we can construct the trail. We're not hindered by trying to change grade to keep a certain amount of dirt over the existing arsenic-laden soil, and we also do not have to monitor it in perpetuity. That goes away.
But we do have to hog all of that out, all that dirt, dispose of it, and we have to delineate it for $60,000, and then we're going to have to remove it and dispose of it, which will be $100,000 or $200,000. That's my guess. I know you said you don't have a guess, but it could be that. It'll be $100,000 easy, and then we have to bring in all new soil, and then we have to do testing to make sure it's all gone, and then we have to put in new soil and then finish the trail.
That sounds like it's going to cost about $55,000, give or take.
The township was awarded a grant for the remediation in the amount of $407,000. So we're hoping that, and that grant is specific to the remediation of the arsenic. So we're hoping that all that's going to be, we can't use it for the engineering. It's going to be solely for the arsenic remediation.
Yeah, the $55,000 is only to delineate where the arsenic is. So all of this is new costs are going to be showing up, and it probably will be $400,000.
That I can't tell you, Commissioner.
Is the arsenic man-made, or is it just natural?
I don't know how this occurred, Commissioner. I don't.
Okay, because if it was from somebody
May I
else.
just say, large-scale treatment of timber with chromated copper, arsenate, and creosote oil by the wood-preserving industry leads to a significant source of arsenic in the environment. So when that was a rail bed, that wood was treated with creosote, which contains arsenic, that leaches into the soil. When it's pulled out, it's still there. When the rail beds
So
are
whose
pulled out.
fault, so my question is, you're a lawyer, whose fault is it?
It's the railroads.
The railroad's long gone.
So
ours now.
it's a bankrupt railroad, most likely.
Maybe not. Maybe we could find a successor in interest.
It's
that
not
we could
like,
go after.
Well, whether or not there's a successor or there isn't, we have to remove it.
Okay.
And in order to be able to remove it, we have to study it and delineate it, as you said.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't see any, I think we have to approve this. That was my question. So if we have to approve it, then.
You never have to approve anything, Commissioner.
Okay. If I don't have to, I'm not going to.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Any public comment? All in favor, say arsenic and old lace. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Moving on to reports of standing committees. Do we have any?
I'll just report again on the Owls for the Shelves for the library. The move-a-thon starts November 20th and runs through December 4th, and then the 5K and fun run is December 4th. I'll leave some flyers on the back, but you can go to the website to sign up, radnorlibrary.org. So help support the library. Thanks.
Old business. Jake, the West Wayne Cemetery discussion, funding for fence repairs.
Yeah, I'm going to hand that over to Bill. I think he's done the research, I don't even know what he's about to say.
Yeah, so, yeah, I apologize, Jake. Including up to about 5:29 tonight before we jumped into executive session, we were still researching this. If I could ask for just a little bit more time on the research. The problem that we've run into is everybody remembers the conversation. We were, when this was adopted back in 2012, 13, whenever that development went in. What we're not seeing is that it was identified in any of the agreements. And therefore, we're having trouble tracking any dollar amounts back. We're going through the escrow account right now. Every single deposit and expense over the course of the project. And we've got several unanswered calls back to both the developer and the attorney representing to see if we can get some clarification on it. So I apologize, as of right now, I just don't have a definitive answer on the 10,000. Other than it's not in the agreement documents. We went back, like I said, finance is going through all the escrow. Peggy has spent a ton of hours. She went back to the meeting video, went through the minutes. So we are looking. I promise we're looking. We just haven't had anything definitive yet. Hopefully there's a missing piece out there we just haven't come across. And unfortunately, I mean, this, you know, Steve and I and Peggy were talking earlier, you know, when these arrangements are made, usually on the floor during the discussions, we got to make sure that they're included in the documents. So I apologize, that's not better news at this point, but.
It's all right, it's all right. I guess we'll get more information next meeting, but what fund was the previous manager referencing when he told me that there was money set aside?
I can't answer that, other than.
Seemed to be pretty sure there was an account somewhere with 10,000 in it.
Well, the only account I could think of that would have applied to is the escrow. And it's not immediately obvious, so.
Let's kick this to the next meeting and we can get some additional information. I have one very quick item of new business that I'd like.
I have an old business, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I meant old business. I have one additional item of old business.
Okay, do you want to go and then I can, or you want to go? I have something.
Thank you. I have one additional item of old business that I'd like to bring to the board's attention. There was a sidewalk on Ferriston Avenue that got torn up by the owner of the property. Completely legally, it was not in the township right-of-way. It had previously been put there as a courtesy, I think, to the neighborhood. The new owner did not see fit to keep it there. Steve Norsini and Ricky in our Public Works Department were able to engineer and build and install a sidewalk at that site in the right-of-way to replace it incredibly inexpensively, incredibly quickly. It's at an extraordinarily high bar, and you guys now all know that our Public Works Department can do that. So just like stick sidewalks in everywhere. It was phenomenal. So thank you to both of them. Okay, Sean.
Okay, thank you. So a couple meetings ago, we had the Garrett Hill overlay, and that was voted down. So I have had time to read the new rooftop dining, and I just don't think that it makes sense to put outdoor dining in there as a waiver request. Outdoor dining is something separate than rooftop dining. I can go through all about it. It's not uniform. I think it sends a message to the public that, you know, we only want rooftop dining, and I don't think that's the case. I think that some outdoor dining is fine. It's confusing. But to this board's, to the way the board voted, I would be in favor of reintroducing these under two separate ordinances and going from there. So that is my request. If there is prior to the reintroduction, if the 12 seats or something is not kosher with you guys, and that's fine, we could change it. But I think that we should keep these things simple and not put a waiver request in section 2 on page 5 of an ordinance that I think it's apples and oranges. I don't think that Outdoor dining is outdoor dining. Rooftop dining is something separate. So it shouldn't be a waiver request. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it easy to find. Let's keep it simple. So I would like to make a motion to reintroduce those two ordinances separately. And then if it goes to the board, then they can get re-advertised and we can vote on them.
Let me just make a suggestion. First of all,
This isn't in front of us.
it's not on the agenda, so you can't vote on it.
No, that's fine. Then I'll
And-
get consensus from the board and I'll put it up in the next meeting.
And that ordinance, Sean, is going to work its way with the rooftop and the waiver. It's going to work its way through planning, and at that point, I think if you want to break something out of that, it's going to come back to this board. The waiver language is going to be modified. There's some issues with that Kevin and Mary Everly and I are working on. So, but it's going to go through planning. It's going to have to come back in some kind of a format. If you have two ordinances you want to introduce, you need to, they need to come back to the board as two ordinances.
That's fine. I just don't think that it should be a waiver to have outdoor dining. Rooftop is much different, so then we need to put this on under a new topic for next meeting.
Sean, I just find it very curious that you want to split two very associated rooftop and outdoor dining, but you would not take a height of a house out of your outdoor dining ordinance when you presented the Garrett Hill.
Actually, that's a great point. Thanks for
I
bringing
just-
it.
I don't-
No,
I'm just baffled by your logic.
Commissioner Maroney, I'm going to explain it. I actually spoke to Mary Eberly, who said that it actually saves money on the advertising to do that. And actually, I spoke to John Rice. He said they're not that. He said they're not that. What was the term they used? He said that they were pretty simple things. You weren't totally getting rid of it. So yeah, so I did actually talk to two of our solicitors, and they were actually fine with it. So, thank you. Great.
Others weren't because it didn't pass.
And you seem happy that it didn't pass, and happy that you have.
Okay,
No,
come
no,
on.
I'm
All right, well-
I'm going to respond, and then she can get the last word, and that's fine. But you
No,
seem
she
happy
doesn't
that
get
it
the last
didn't
word.
pass, and happy that, yeah, that I look bad, and my neighbors look bad, and their businesses that are suffering. So you should be proud.
Is there any final
Yeah,
public comment?
my one comment also is the riots on January 6th have not resulted in any person, to my knowledge, being charged with sedition or insurrection. And there are people who are still being held without charges, and it's likely unlawful. So
How about the
that's a
QAnon
travesty
horn
that
guy?
we should strive to correct, and I just wanted to clarify that because at the beginning of the meeting it was brought up
But how
otherwise.
about the Viking guy with the big,
Is there any
He's
public
still being
comment?
held without,
Jack,
still being held.
Jack, one last thing. Bill, do we have any update on Report It?
Yes. So we are in the final stages of the website rollout, which will include the rollout of not just the website, but the Report It and Code Red. So they were all kind of within a month or two of being ready to go, so we decided to hold off and just do all three at once. We're shooting for early December to roll all three out. So early December. Look for the news on that. It'll include the website, Report It, and Code Red, all three of them.
Public comment. Thank you both. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Got to move in second.
That one. I'll
Second.
move. Excellent, say aye.
Aye.
We're done. Thank you.